Welcome to this meeting of the Western and Southern Area Planning Committee on Thursday, the 27th of February, 2025. For the benefit of the public attending today or watching on the live stream, I'm Councillor Bolwell, Chair of this committee, and on my left is Councillor Neil Isenk, who is my Vice Chair. The meeting is being live streamed and will be available to view on the Council website after the meeting. By attending this meeting, you consent to being filmed. Can I remind everyone that when you are speaking, please speak directly into the microphones so that you can be clearly heard and seen. The Planning Committee is not a public meeting, but a meeting to which the public is invited. All attendees must comply with the ruling of the Chair. They must not interrupt the meeting or cause undue disturbance. To support this, please switch off your mobile phones or select silent mode for the duration of the meeting. And those using Teams, please ensure your microphones are on mute and your device volume is set to 0 to maintain audio quality. Only those who have registered to speak in accordance with the speaking protocol will be invited to address the committee for a maximum of 3 minutes. That will be limited to the first 3 people objecting to and the first three people supporting the application to have registered along with the Parish Council and ward members. No materials to be circulated to members of the committee. We have 5 applications to determine today. The case officer will be invited to present the report and recommendations. Next, I will invite members of the public who have registered to speak with the Democratic Services Officer before the deadline to address the committee in the following order: public against, public support, then applicant or agent, followed by the Town Council, and finally ward members. Each speaker has a maximum of 3 minutes. Can I remind speakers that other than the allotted 3 minutes, there will not be any further opportunity to speak. Following on from the registered public speakers, the planning officers will have the opportunity to address any salient points they wish to clarify, and committee members will be given the opportunity to ask questions of the planning officers before moving on to debate. When we go into councillor questions and debate, for the benefit of the public watching, can members state their name and ward when addressing the meeting? Next, I'd like to introduce the officers involved in today's meeting. They include Anne Collins, Development Manager, Area Manager, Hannah Massey, Lawyer, Matthew Pochin-Hawkes, Lead Project Officer, Darren Rogers, Senior Planning Officer, Steve Tapscott, Senior Planning Officer, Stephen Horsler, Environmental Health Officer, Paul Eastwood, Engineer, and in front of me I have Josh Kennedy, Democratic Services Officer, and John Miles, Democratic Services Officer. Next, I'd like to conduct a roll call of members present, please. Obviously, Neil and myself are here. Morning, Vice Chair. Belinda Borden. Morning, Belinda. Louise Bown. Morning, Louise. Simon Christopher. Thank you, Simon. Craig Monks. Morning, Craig. Paul Kimber. Morning, Paul. David Northam. Morning, David. Louis O'Leary. Thank you, Louis. Pete Roper. Morning, Pete. And Kate Weller. Morning, Kate. Do we have any apologies, Josh, please?
Thank you. Yes, we've had apologies from Councillor David Shortell.
Lovely, thank you. That's noted. Now we move on to item 2 on the agenda, which is declarations of interest. I assume there will be some this morning due to a council meeting held last night in Weymouth. So could I please ask members that wish to make a declaration to raise their hands? First, Councillor O'Leary, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I am a member of Weymouth Town Council. During the discussion last night, I left the room completely and therefore took no part in the discussion. But as I am a member of Weymouth Town Council and they are the applicant, although I took no part in the discussion, am I still permitted to speak and vote on the item? As in the past, I know this is generally the Bridport gang that have had to sort of deal with this one, but they normally leave the room. But can I seek some advice and guidance on that, please?
Yes, certainly. I take it this last item 9 you're referring to. Thank you. Hannah.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think if Weymouth Town Council are the applicant in this case, then yes, you should excuse yourself and leave the room.
Thank you. So when that item comes, Councillor O'Leary, if you'd like to leave the room, that's lovely. Thank you. Who else is it? Councillor Bown?
Yes, Chair. I'm also on Weymouth Town Council and I was present for the discussion last night, so I'll leave the room alongside Louis. Thank you.
Thank you. That's item 9 again. Councillor David Northern, please.
There we go. Press the right button. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Northern, Upwey and Broadway. I left the meeting before this item was discussed in order that I could attend this meeting and take part in the debate. Advice, please.
I believe that's fine, but I will check with legal. Thank you.
So I think the difference in this case is because the Town Council are the applicant. So usually if you're a member of the Town Council and they are advising in their role as a statutory consultee, then it would usually be okay that you had left the room and you had not previously voted on the matter. But in this case, it's slightly different because they are the applicant. So I would suggest that you do have a predetermination there and you should leave the room.
Yeah, sorry about that, Councillor Northern. Councillor Weller, please.
Thank you very much. Exactly the same item. However, I'm afraid I dispute Hannah's advice. The application, I didn't leave the room, but I sat at the back of the room and listened to the debate. The difference here is that this application coming from Weymouth Town Council to the Planning Committee is on the locations and sites on the beach that tenders are being requested. The subject being discussed last night was the tenders being tendered. So last night's debate was a financial debate, not a planning debate. Quite different. Had nothing, at no point did we, clearly names of tenderers were mentioned, but here we're talking about locations on the beach, very much geography rather than financial. They were two quite separate debates, of which I took part in none of it. And if you exclude Weymouth Town councillors on that basis, two of them remained in the room. The rest either took themselves away from the debate or took themselves out of the room completely. If you use your logic, you've got 4 members of this committee immediately have to absent themselves from the debate. The debates are 2 different debates.
Thank you, Councillor Weller. I do understand what you're saying, but I think the problem here is that it's the Town Council that are the applicant, and so you would be voting on an application for an applicant of which you are a member and have an interest in. So I think that's the issue here. It's not that you've voted on the matter previously or come with a predetermination because of debates that you've participated in previously. It's just that you are obviously a member of the association that is the applicant in this case.
Chairman, with the greatest respect, item 9, Weymouth Harbour, the application is Dorset Council. We would all have to absent ourselves. And this happens all the time, that the council makes an application and we are trusted to, we don't have, none of us have a pecuniary interest in this. If we did, we clearly would have to leave the room. But where the council is the applicant, that happens, and we have to be trusted to treat it impartially. We had it with the RNLI recently. We've had it in other cases that we are looking at these things in an independent fashion. And in this particular case, it's excluding 4 councillors from this debate when it comes on to item 6, seriously disadvantages Weymouth Town Council. If we spoke with any sort of side to us, but it disadvantages this planning committee if people who know the area well are unable to share that knowledge in the area, just as we do when it's an independent item. You know, ward councillors know the area well. In this respect, we are the ward councillors and we know the area well. So it disadvantages our colleagues because we can't say, oh yes, that's this or that's that. I mean, you have the applicant who will give you all that advice, and obviously the officers have taken all that advice. But I mean, if that's your ruling, then clearly we have to go by it. But personally, I think that ruling is wrong, and I'd like that minuted, that I think that ruling in this instance is wrong because the two debates are entirely different, in my view.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Weller. I do hear your argument. I'm not a legal expert, so I will have to bow to what Hannah comes through with. Excuse me, Councillor Bowen, I'll just check with Hannah first, and we also have two other councillors that of the hands up, and they haven't even spoken yet. Okay, I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Chair. So I think this would fall under what is classified as an other registerable interest. So you could speak on the matter if you wanted to, but I don't think that you could vote upon it.
Councillor Weathers, that's, it sort of clarifies the situation, but it is an interesting one. We all face this. I've got to make a comment myself shortly. Councillor Kimber.
Sorry. On item 8, I've never had to deal with this in planning. I have come here. I've not made any predetermined thing, but I've had to deal with one of the people that once lived in the house, and I'm going back years. Does that come as a point of interest? I wouldn't say, but.
From the information that you provided, I wouldn't say that there's any conflict of interest there, no.
Thank you. Councillor Roper, please.
Thank you, Chair. Pete Roper, Ward Member for Portland. Regarding agenda item 8, demolition of dwellings on High Street, Portland, I would like to speak as a ward councillor on this item. The future of this site has been discussed many times by Portland Town Council, and I consider that I'm likely predetermined in relation to this planning application.
Okay, so during the officers' debate, if you could move over to this side of the room, and then when the public speaking section has finished, if you could leave while the vote takes place in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Is there anybody else wanting to confuse the meeting this morning? Councillor Bowen, I believe you wanted to say something else.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to suggest before you took your legal advice that, that Councillor Weller could speak as a ward member on the matter.
We'll check with Councillor Weller, please.
Ward member of the Beach, I'm not, Councillor Bowen.
As a local person of interest, I thought you could speak.
Okay, yes. Yes, thank you. Can I also declare an interest on the last item? I'm very happy to leave the room if necessary. I was chairman of Weymouth and Portland Planning Committee for some time, and this particular site came up a number of times, and my opinions are a matter of record. So rather than any risk of predetermination, I will leave the room.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Well. I'll just check with Hannah, but I believe that's acceptable.
Yes, that's correct.
If there are no more councillors wishing to declare an interest, I'd like to declare that I'm a Bridport Ward councillor. At no time have I involved myself in the abattoir application, which is item 5. And I'm not predetermined, but I'm going to check with Hannah now to see whether it's okay for me to chair the committee meeting for that particular item. So just bear with me.
Yes, that is fine, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. Right, item 3 on the agenda is to agree and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of January 2025. If members that were present are happy, the minutes are true record of the meeting, then I will sign them as correct. If not, could you please raise your hands? Thank you. Councillor Kimber, were you raising your hand because they're incorrect? Okay, thank you. I'll speak slower next time. Moving on to, I'll sign those at the end of the meeting. Moving on to item 4, public participation. You now have the opportunity, if you've been registered to speak on the application that you're here for. Otherwise, you can wait for the item to be presented. So if anybody wants to speak now and then leave, if they've got something more pressing. If not, I'll take it that you all wish to speak to your application. Okay, no hands have gone up, so we'll assume that's correct. Item 5, planning applications, which is, so we now move to application P/FUL/2024/04044, aptly named Slaughterhouse, Mangerton Lane, Bridport, DT6 3SF. This will be presented by Darren Rogers. Firstly, we have speakers. Darren, if you'd like to do your presentation, we'll take the speakers afterwards. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman, and good morning, committee. I'll just get the screen shared for you. So as you quite rightly said, Chairman, it's an application to extend, alter the existing abattoir, including associated drainage and landscaping works, and to form a car parking area. I'll start off from a kind of a macro point of view and then hone in on the site itself. But I thought it'd be useful for members to understand where the site is in relation to the kind of wider context of Bridport and Bradpole in particular. So up in the top left-hand corner here, we've got the application site itself outlined in red. This is the A3066 that leads from Gore Cross Industrial Estate heading towards Melplash and Beminster. The Gore Cross Industrial Estate is accessed just here off the roundabout, and just to the south of that industrial estate is the Sir John Colfax School. So that shows it in its wider context. Just slightly moving in a tad, this is the application site which currently exists as a vacant abattoir use. This is the access road that leads to the rural lane, which effectively starts here, and we go into a single carriageway. And I just thought I'd show you where the site is in relation to the Bradpole Conservation Area. You'll see from the report that the impact on heritage assets, these brown buildings are listed buildings, and the shaded area is the conservation area, is not considered to be adversely affected, and you'll see why when I come on to show you the site itself, bearing in mind that this site is in somewhat of a hole at a lower level to Mangerton Lane. This shows the site centrally located on the screen, and I've indicated a number of public footpaths that adjoin the site. This is public footpath W61 that comes off Mangerton Lane here and then shoots southwards towards the urban part of Bradpole. And to the north of the site, you have a public footpath which is W62 that leads along the northern boundary and then swings onto open fields and heads southwards, and likewise heading northeastwards is public footpath W63. So that just shows the context that you can see this, notwithstanding the location of the existing site set at a lower level to Mangerton Lane, you can see it from public rights of way. And of course, the designation here is, as it is across the whole of this particular part of West Dorset, an AONB national landscape. This shows the site, the application site's outlined in red. The reason why we've got part of the site in blue is because there are proposals to provide additional landscape buffering works, both to this northern boundary and to the eastern boundary. This is all part and parcel of the applicant's mitigation and biodiversity net gain 10% proposals. The site itself is the abattoir building and a lairage building with some various ancillary structures, and it also incorporates a Ridgeway house, which is a two-storey detached house, and planning permission was granted for essentially the development as a whole in the 1990s, as is set out in the officer's report, and it is also subject to a legal agreement in relation to the dwelling, that it be occupied by person or persons and their dependents who manage the abattoir, essentially. That's dealt with by Section 106 agreement, and I'll come on to that as part of the presentation. So that shows the site as existing. This is effectively a topographical survey that's been provided. That's the main abattoir building there. There's a lairage, agricultural looking type building just to the south of it. And this is the existing house with access as existing, which is effectively going to be retained off Mangerton Lane here. That's what the existing building looks like. So that's the north elevation at the top and the south elevation. And these are the west and east elevations of the existing building. This is a floor plan of the existing abattoir building, and you've got lairage areas, you've got slaughter areas, you've got fridge areas, as well as ancillary rooms associated with that. There are also offices at first floor level, which are incorporated directly above and within effectively the roof area. That's the existing dwelling house, which is intended to remain. Two-storey house, double detached garage, conservatory at the rear. That's the floor plan. It's a 3-bedroom dwelling. And these are some of the existing maintenance buildings which exist as ancillary buildings on the site. This is the lairage building. So this is that L-shaped looking agricultural type looking building to the south of the main abattoir building. That shows the roof plan, floor plan. And that building is located here. So that lairage building is located here, and that would be removed. So I thought before I went on to the scheme itself, I'd probably interject with a few photographs. So this is the aerial photographs from Google Earth. This shows the dwelling here. This is the existing footpath that leads up to here and then shoots off south. And then you've got footpaths that come around here and shoot off here. You can just about see a little bit of indentation in the agricultural field that indicates where those footpaths are. This is a view looking from the south, so that's looking southwards. Bradpole is to the south. This is looking from the north, and you can just see the urban part, the more built-up part of Bradpole located here. And there's our site, there's the existing lairage building, and there's the house. Again, this is looking from the east and the west, so just giving you a flavour of the existing building that currently exists in the landscape. This is the access to the site. So this is at Townsend Way, just before it goes into Mangerton Lane. The site notice that was erected here to alert members of the public. I think there's a national speed limit, but people, I would suggest, do not do the national speed limit because it's single carriageway. But that's what effectively a lot of the rural roads in West Dorset comprise. And then this is the access, the vehicular access. So that's heading off down towards Mangerton Mill, This is the site itself, and you really can't see the site from Mangerton Lane. This is looking back from Mangerton Lane, back up towards Townsend Way, and you've got the existing house set behind this existing landscaping as well. That's the existing building. So as you can see, you'll all make your minds up as to whether you think that is attractive. Personally, I think it's not a thing of beauty, but it has been there well established since the 1990s, since the original permissions were granted for the abattoir development. It's obviously grey in colour. I think that tends to meet the landscape architects' national requirements, where grey agricultural buildings are seen better than other colours, because that's the prevailing. I say that on a very sunny day, when we've got March in the next 3 or 4 days coming with sunny days, but that's the prevailing cloud conditions that we get in the UK, particularly in the winter time. This shows the site. So this is Mangerton Lane. The vehicular access is just located there on screen. This is the existing agricultural field access, and this is where the public footpath runs alongside this boundary. And this picture below is taken from just inside that gateway. So that's looking back at the house, and the public footpath runs here and then runs southwards. That's the existing dwelling, 2-storey in nature, double detached garage. And this is the public footpath to the north of the site. So the main access, you can see where the existing dwelling house is there. So the existing main access is just located here. There's the sign that says, "Welcome to Bradpole, please drive carefully." And this is the public right-of-way that leads off from the north. This is from the eastern public rights-of-way. So this shows the existing open aspect to the adjacent eastern agricultural fields. And you can see the mass scale and bulk of the existing proposal. The lairage building that's intended to be removed is located here. So onto the proposed site plan. You can just about make out, if I highlight it with my pointer, a hatched area that shows the existing structure on site, which effectively is that. And you've got this that shows the lairage building, and there are other ancillary buildings, one here, for example, one here, for example, that would be all removed, and the building would be extended out eastwards, partially northwards here, and to the west to provide a new development, effectively. Car parking is proposed on this northern boundary, but access is to be retained where the existing access here is, and there will be a gated access into these car parking areas. And at the rear of the house, there is also intended to be a new car parking area with access utilised by the existing access to the house, and a new security gate building that's intended to be located here, so that people visiting this car park have to go through security and pass through the footpath network in order to access the wider site. The public footpath that runs along here is intended to be retained, so there's no alteration in effect to the route of that public footpath. And then onto the eastern part, this is where additional landscape treatment is planned, to both seeking to mitigate some of the impact of the building and comprising the BNG 10% requirements, as this is a major application. And the BNG came in February of 2024 for this type of scheme. This shows the car parking area in a little bit more detail. It's a staff and visitors car park, disabled car parking spaces. There will be a retaining wall at the back of the one bit of car park, given the difference in levels. That's the security hut, and a new staff footpath leading through security and into and across the access into the site itself. And this is the existing public right-of-way that would be retained as part and parcel of the scheme. As you can see, this is all intended to be landscaped.
Can you just change your pointer to the red dots? Click on it.
Do you want to hold on?
Thank you. I've paused the meeting because I'm having problems personally seeing the pointer on the screen, I don't know if members have the same issue, but it's very difficult when Darren's speaking to say you can see the car park, etc., and I can't see what he's pointing at. So just bear with for a few minutes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Would you like to put your microphone back on, Darren, as soon as I switch off? Thank you.
Sorry for that, Chairman, and thanks for putting me right. So I'll start again in terms of the proposed site plan. You can just about see the hatched or greyed dotted line here that shows the existing building and the Lairage building located there, and the existing buildings, the ancillary buildings, some of which are intended to go. And then you can see the building being extended to the east, to the north, and to the west, given the existing building that's on that site. Car parking intended to go along this boundary here. The vehicular access stays the same. Gated access into that car parking area, access into the existing access to the house that would lead to a car parking area at the rear of the existing house, and a new security building located here so that people have to pass through security along this footpath network across the access and into the site. I was explaining that the public right-of-way along here stays effectively the same. Retaining wall proposed as part and parcel of the car parking works, landscaping to be proposed as well, and that retaining wall given the slight difference in levels. To the east of the site, as I was explaining, landscape works is intended to be proposed, partly as mitigation in relation to the alterations and as per BNG requirements, both to the north and to the east. I was explaining that this is the detailed plan of the car parking area set at the rear of the house. There's the security hut structure, new footpath leading through security into the staff footpath and across the access road into the wider site. Public right-of-way kept, retaining wall proposed, landscaping around the site. This shows, again, a bit more detail. You can just see the outline of the existing building that I'm just following the cursor around. Existing Lairage building to be removed, ancillary structures here also to be removed, car parking proposed, and a lot of the boundary treatment on the northern and western elements are intended to be retained. I think that just is a similar plan to the one I've previously shown about the eastern landscaping works. As part and parcel of the submission and the noise report that's been submitted, there are a number of mitigation measures which are outlined in the report, one of which is a 3-metre high timber acoustic fence that's intended to be erected along the northern and the western boundaries, essentially within the existing boundary and proposed boundary treatment, but also along the eastern and southern part, enclosing outside ancillary buildings as well. So that's what the intended 3-metre high timber fence would look like. I think over subsequent years, weathering will make that effectively go to a silvery grey colour. These are the elevations. So again, I'll try and show you by following my cursor. So the building as existing is, as you can see, dotted. So you can see the mass scale and bulk of what's proposed here and elements here. That's on the north elevation. The south elevation, you can see the building as is earmarked there. So the building will not get any higher than the existing building, but will be increased in volume this end and partly towards here as well. These show the west and the east elevations where the mass scale and bulk is more acute. So you can see the as existing building shown in hatched, both in terms of the west elevation and the east elevation, with the additional masses of the building either side. The materials, we've had much discussion with the AONB National Landscape Officer about the use of materials. The proposal, which is also subject to a condition requiring materials to be submitted and approved in any event, is intended that metal clad in anthracite grey colour, based on that National Landscape Architect principles I said about grey being the usual type of colour associated with developments in rural areas. But also, there's also intended to be box profile metal cladding and a bottle green colour, given those photographs I outlined earlier, and the largely green landscaping that adjoins and forms part of the rural part of this bit of the AONB. So the outline of the existing building will be now higher, just to highlight that. All facing materials would have a matte colour, so that they're not shiny for obvious reasons. And again, this shows the outline of the existing building in terms of its height. Roller shutters are intended to be olive green, and a part of the building boxed profile metal cladding also bottle green. So what we're trying to do here is to seek to mitigate the impact of the proposals given the national landscape designation. And again, that's indicated by cladding panels here, and the box profile green colour and the green colour of the micro rib as well. So very much trying to mute it as far as possible. This is a detailed landscaping plan that's been submitted following discussions with your National Landscape AONB officer. These are all to be conditioned as well, as is set out in the report. And this also forms part of the BNG proposals, where land would be graded back along here and provided with a screening buffer, seeking to mitigate its impact, notwithstanding the fact that you will no doubt see this new building from the public rights of way, and a new essentially landscape belt along that northern boundary. These are the boundary treatments indicated, and basically talking about the protection of trees, the boundary treatment specification where you've got security fencing, palisade security fencing, walls, a green retaining wall and timber post and rail fencing that's proposed as well. That's all detailed as part and parcel of any planning permission should it be granted. And then we've got the landscape proposals indicating the biodiversity net gain approach and the ecology and hedgehog access, which has been subject to consultation with the natural environment team, who've issued a certificate of approval to the ecology proposals. A couple of cross sections. So this shows the house itself, the car parking area. That's the route of the existing public footpath. You can see there's the retaining wall. You can just about see the difference in levels with landscaping there. And this is showing Mangerton Lane, landscaping that's proposed, and the fall for car parking with the existing house as well, and then landscaping proposed on the eastern side. Again, a couple of cross-section drawings, just trying to highlight the mass scale and bulk of the existing building, highlighted as per the dotted line, and then what is proposed in terms of the mass scale and bulk of the proposal. This is the security hut, a very simple pitched roof building that will provide a reception and office. And I've indicated where that would be near to the house for security purposes for visitors and for those staff visiting. That's where it's intended to be located, just here. And these drawings show the proposed side access with the widths indicated, 6 metres, access widths 5.9 for the access to the rear car park. All of this has been subject to consultation with highways. This shows the swept paths into the site from vehicles. And it also shows those swept paths and the ability for vehicles to come in, reverse and emerge back in a forward gear. As I said, that's also all been subject to highways, and you've got the highways response as part and parcel of your report. Just to go back to the visual impact of the as existing building before I conclude the presentation. So that's what we're currently faced with as existing. These are permissions from the early 1990s. And I need to remind committee that notwithstanding the proposed extension and alterations, the use has been vacant for couple of 3 years. And I think that those, quite understandably, raising objections to the scheme, look on this in terms of the fact that potentially, that's the baseline, that there's been no use there, but the use could commence, I would say tomorrow, but tomorrow is impractical, but it could operate later on in this year by utilising these existing buildings without there being any breach of planning control. There are also no planning conditions attached to the existing operation facility, and I've set that out in the report. And I think what this application does is it seeks for the council to obtain an element of control, hence the suggested hours of operation condition that's listed in the officer's report, over and above the existing situation. And one final thing to remind members of is that, as the report sets out, this is there are two effectively legislative aspects with regards to this proposal. There's the need for planning permission, which is what this committee is all about, but there would be a separate environmental permit regulation requirement that's administered by, I think, Environment Agency. Steve Horsler's here from Environmental Health, who may be able to pick up on that. And they will deal with effectively the operational aspects, and particularly from an odour point of view. And if members have in their mind the Portland Port incinerator application, which was a planning application which committee refused, but then was subsequently allowed on appeal, and I know the council are still seeking to fight that decision, but there is a separate environmental permitting legislation that's seeking to control that as well. My report sets out that para 201 of the NPPF says that where there are separate legislative controls, we need to focus on the planning merits of the proposal, not the other matters that would be subject to other controls. And I think from that, Chairman, I think that probably concludes the presentation. Oh, other than key issues at the rear of the presentation, which effectively is set out in the report. There are a number of key issues. Principle of the development, what I've explained, that the adopted and the Bridport Neighbourhood Plan permits extensions to employment, land and buildings, which we've got here. The scale and the design of it is considered to be acceptable. We're trying to mitigate its impact as far as is possible. There is a localised adverse impact in relation to the car park, but subject to landscaping and obviously the benefits that would arise here. It's not considered that would justifiably result in a recommendation for refusal of permission. Lighting is controlled. The impact on living conditions of occupants and neighbouring properties, significant consideration, but it is some distance from those neighbours. And I remind members of the fallback position of the extant use. Impact on landscape and heritage, I outlined that at the start of the report, showing the relationship to heritage assets, no adverse impact there. Flood risk and drainage, there are no adverse flood risks and drainage issues which can't be dealt with via planning conditions. And economic benefits, you'll see from the report that the Council's Economic Development Officer fully supports the application. They suggest that they'd be worth circa £2 million in terms of investment for this site, the potential for creation of up to 20 jobs, and it helps to support the Council's agri-tech key sector, which is what the Economic Development Officer has said. Highways have raised no objections. They've considered the traffic assessment that's been submitted very thoroughly and have come up with detailed conditions and informative notes. No adverse impact on trees. It will be subject to biodiversity net gain. No impact on nutrient neutrality. And we've carried out a screening opinion under environmental impact assessments, which falls under the planning regime, and concluded that the proposal is not EIA development. And I've just repeated again the highways and impacts associated with that use. And finally, just to say, the recommendation is to delegate the decision, Chairman, because the existing house, which is subject to the Section 106, or subject to a Section 106 agreement, controlling occupation of persons who are involved in management of the facility, that's linked to the 1990 planning permissions. And we need to somehow link any approval of this application, if members approve it, via a legal agreement in relation to the existing house to this planning application. So that concludes my presentation, Chairman, which that last bit has just been set out on that recommendation screen. And there are a couple of updates to the conditions which are hopefully are on the committee update sheet. and an additional condition 21 about the implementation of the acoustic screen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darren. I think you've managed to summarise a rather complex situation there. We'll now move to speakers, please, the public speakers. First of all, we'll take those that are objecting. So the first speaker will be Elizabeth Harrop. Elizabeth, you have 3 minutes, starting from the time you speak. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to just correct a couple of things from Darren's presentation. One omission, an important omission, was a 1994 informative by the Planning Authority that there should be no further development and it was inappropriate for that site. And that predated the housing that's then grown up around it. A second misconception is that objectors are anti-abattoir. We're not. I accept there's going to be an abattoir on that site. I want to see the right abattoir. The right abattoir is a multi-species, smaller operation that does not need to tarmac the meadow area that's currently tied to the house. Multi-species smaller abattoirs are supported by the government. They meet climate objectives, sustainability objectives. They support rare breeds protection. Networks of smaller abattoirs are vital in terms of government commitments, both nationally and locally, that the UK has signed up for. In terms of the implications, one of the photos Darren showed, it shows the entranceway to the lane as you go to the site. It critically omitted and chopped off, presumably intentionally, Gore Terrace, which is a row of red brick houses which sit right at that entranceway. The implications of this expansion are enormous at the size of the operation. So we're looking at noise pollution, light pollution, odour pollution, critical vibrational issues from the juggernauts on the houses and safety issues. My daughter walks to school along the residential lane where juggernauts will be 1 every 4 minutes in peak hours. I don't want to have mitigated her safety risks by a load of talk about Bottle Green. It doesn't reassure me at all. We've been told by Pickstocks previously and by Darren just now, we're going to open it anyway. So you're over a barrel, actually, because we're going to do the livestock units anyway, and all that you're going to lose is the welfare side. Well, what that tells me, firstly, is that there's a kind of implied threat here behind the desire to approve. And secondly, that the welfare that Pickstocks allegedly champions so much is actually arbitrary. What I'm asking here to do is to get off that over the barrel, stand up beside it, create the possibility for something better for that site, and say no to this proposal. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Sorry, I thought you were going to finish up a bit longer there, but that's lovely. No, you have 30 more seconds. Do you wish to use them? Okay, that's lovely. Thank you. We now have Mrs. Leliev, please. Objection?
I speak to you as a resident of Townsend Way, a minor road with a major problem. It leads to a small country lane which houses a small country abattoir. The problem? A multinational company wants to extend this little abattoir into a facility totally inappropriate for the area. In short, to replace the corner shop with a hypermarket, with all the nightmare logistics that entails. 13-hour shift patterns 5 days a week to become 21 hours 7 days a week. 2 HGV lorries to become an army of juggernauts. In 1994, the council advised against extension for very good reasons, and it's a mystery to us as to why so far it ignores its own good advice. A clear lack of adequate notification meant residents were completely unaware of this application. Alerted by chance, we quickly informed residents, resulting in 95 objections and 2 in support. Regrettably, if this goes ahead, residents of Bridport, Sherborne, Weymouth, Beminster, Lyme Regis, Chiddock and others will be stricken with lorries and increased traffic levels on weekdays and weekends. The plan is at 8 two-way trips during AM peak hour and 16 at PM peak hour, approximately 1 trip every 4 minutes. Worryingly, peak times clash with Colfox and Bridport schools' start and finish times. School children and parents will be put at risk from lorry loads passing by pavements daily. The Highways report states, Overall, it can be concluded that the proposed development will have a low impact on the local highway network. We take issue with this, and I know for a fact some councillors agree that the transport and lorry movements haven't been properly addressed. Recently, a juggernaut parked in Townsend Way. You'll have seen the photos. It was like having a block of flats overlooking the gardens and really brought home to everyone the size of these vehicles, far bigger than HGVs used previously. It really is quite frightening. If this proposal proceeds, it will completely change the character of this area forever. The conservation area used by families and children does what it should and is appreciated by the whole community. There's an open-air gym, disabled access, a picnic area. Summer fetes are held, dog owners use it. Children's football clubs play there. Nobody will want to enjoy this precious facility alongside cattle-laden juggernauts. Townsend Way, please think of the impact on small children of seeing and hearing such huge vehicles hurtling by. I ask the question, would any one of us here today choose to subject our children, grandchildren and dogs to the resulting anxiety and risk? Summertime brings many cyclists and cyclist clubs along the road with frequent races and tourists. Traffic is often gridlocked in the mornings, backed up from Mangerton Lane. Juggernauts will experience the same fate. To conclude, we're in your hands and trusting you to put your community's well-being before a multinational business which has little interest in benefiting Dorset. Thank you. I fell from my seat.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. And lastly, Stuart Hine, please. Objection?
Thank you. As residents of Townsend Way, the village of Bradpole and West Dorset, we have thoroughly considered the implications of this application. For our community, we find there is just so much wrong with this proposal, which we feel includes so many sweeping statements that are unqualified with real data. The application states the site is 2.5 kilometres from the centre of Bridport to north-east of Bradpole and 5 kilometres north of West Bay, blatantly to infer that the site is miles from residential areas. It negates to advise that this development would bring the site to within just 130 metres of the homes on the edge of Bradpole permitted development boundary, merely a small field's width from these homes. The redevelopment would more than double in size, employ more than twice the number of staff, 45, operate for longer hours and use more frequent and larger articulated lorries than previously. And yet we are to believe that it will really be the same as before. No reliable comparative data has been provided, just anecdotes from the previous owner and a few notebooks of poorly presented records. However, residents recall the truth of it. The odd lorry, low numbers of small trucks and trailers that were infrequent, sporadic, and mostly sheep and pigs. To tell us that the operation will be directly comparable to the previous abattoir is risible. Common sense and maths tell us that it is in comparison will be a stream of juggernauts delivering regularly to a large industrial factory. More recently, the application has added that the operation will also include Saturday and Sunday working. The application states shorter trips for the welfare of livestock, but this is not qualified. From our research, we discovered that the model of the company is to monopolise the trade in moribund cattle for low-grade beef. This site will call on the cattle from the whole of the southwest, bringing them to this point for slaughter. Thus, the cattle will almost certainly be travelling further to this location than they would have if using local Devon or Cornwall abattoirs. It really hasn't been a functional abattoir for 2-3 years, and in the years before that it was subject to closures, welfare issues and legal requirements to upgrade. As such, it failed more than once and has been closed for 2 or more years. But the Dorset farmers have clearly managed to make use of the existing abattoir network. There have been 95 objections to the application and just 2 in support. We note that none are from local farmers supporting the reopening and expansion. In truth, it will be of negligible value to North Dorset farmers. The site has been subject to 2 previous expansions, the last in '94. The planning committee advised that this should be the last expansion on the site. A lot has changed in this part of Bradpole since 1994. A new housing estate has been built and a new road built to access these homes and a recreation park. Right, to conclude, if this were a new application to site an industrial-sized abattoir here today, just 130 metres from residences, hauling articulated HGVs through a quiet residential area, directly past an established family children's play area, the answer would surely be no. The redevelopment of this site will erode the amenity value of our village, create danger for children and families using the play area, and generally cause misery for our community. Please do not allow the ruination of our residential community in this corner of the Dorset national landscape that is our home. Thank you very much, Mr. Hine. That was spot on time.
I now call for Robert Bowditch support.
Thank you. We are farmers that we farm in Bedminster. We are speaking on behalf of lots of other farmers because lots of farmers don't like to speak at these things. There is thousands of cows in our area. We are a predominantly dairy area. We have missed having a local slaughterhouse. I used to go to the slaughterhouse when it was first opened, and we supported it all the way through. We're looking for Pickstocks are a professional outfit. We've sent cows to them before. We're currently sending cows a long way, and this is what we don't like. We want to be able to send our cows, 15, 20 minutes down the road. And I know of thousands of cows that are between 15 and 20 minutes down the road. The other thing that I'd like to point out is we have been lucky in our area that peers and people I went to school with have always been able to find employment in our local area. And it's very important that people that are born and raised here have the opportunity to get jobs in our area rather than having to go out and look to other cities and other towns to find employment and then move away. It's important to our local infrastructure that people that are born here and can work here can also afford to buy houses here. In response to multi-species slaughterhouse, it's very expensive to have 3 different lines of killing in a slaughterhouse, and we want our cows to be the main focus, and we want professional people to deal with our cows on their last journeys, and that's the key for us. Is we want a local slaughterhouse again, and it's very important to us. And in a time of a lot of pessimism around, especially agriculture, it's great that a professional family business is keen to invest in our local area, renovating and improving an established part of our West Dorset economy. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that. Right. Darren, would you like to respond? Oh, sorry, forgot. I thought I was told the applicant wasn't here. Oh, you are here. Sorry. That's you weren't here at the time. I do apologise. So you made it. Over to you then, Greg, please.
Yeah, so I'd just like to add to that is in 1990s when the factory was built, it was a very modern facility at the time. And we'd like to bring it up to the 2025, increase or improve and upgrade the facility. You can see there's quite a lot of investment. We're planning quite a lot of investment into the facility, and the main of that investment, as you can see when Mr. Rogers showed the plan, is the main of the upsizing of the facility is for animal welfare and staff welfare. So the actual factory itself is very, very closely staying to the same size as it was. And also quite a lot more of the investment, as you can see, is in the surrounds of the building, like the car parking, is to make it more safe for our employees, and that's why we need it. And also, by upgrading the facility, it helps us with the food safety and gets us, like was mentioned before, the factory did struggle with some regulations, and I think by the investment come in, which is the reason for the investment come in is because Dorset is a very dense area of livestock. It does have a very dense area of livestock. We'd like to reduce travel times to our factory in Telford, and the improvements we're making is off a proven factory that we run in Telford today. And also, I'd just like to say, if the factory was to be opened as it is today, it wouldn't have to run off an IPPC license, but we, as a business, we do need to run off an IPPC license. We're used to running off environmental licenses. So I think actually the investment, and looking at what Mr. Rogers showed this morning, it does show improvement in all ways. So I don't think it's a backward step, but So that's why we'd please ask you to approve the planning. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for that. That concludes the public speakers. So now it will be over to Darren to come back with a response to any of the points raised, please.
Just a couple, Chairman. I mean, I completely get the third-party objections. I completely understand their concerns. You've heard from the applicant about the fact that essentially the operational aspects of the use is effectively similar. And you've got the proposal for animal welfare modernisation and staff welfare modernisation as part and parcel of the scheme. Just to touch upon the informative note that was attached to the one of the last planning permissions from the 1990s, which indicated that there's this informative note that indicates that no further expansion is likely to be entertained. I mean, that's a bit like saying that the verbal agreement I've got's not worth the paper it's written on. For obvious reasons, there's no agreement. You've said verbally, there's nothing written down. And it doesn't stop, it cannot stop anyone applying for a planning application in the normal sense, and for that application to be considered, assessed, consulted upon, which is where we are here today. So little weight, if any, in my view, should be given to that notion that an informative note following a planning permission in the 90s said, can you not come back to us anymore, please? That was 30 years ago, and the application has been duly made, duly processed, duly considered, and duly reported.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you very much for that. Members, technical questions, please, if you have any for the officer before we move to debate. I hope you've read all the conditions. There's quite a lot there, so I will excuse anybody who asks a question that's in the paperwork. Councillor Kimber.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Paul Kimber, Portland. I just wonder if you can show us on the overhead, particularly the nearest, I believe, Colfox School, and also there was mentioned on the presentation some houses that's there as well. And I take it these are not, these houses haven't just been built. Probably, I can, thank you very much, I can see them, yeah.
So that's the Google Street View. So the picture I showed was to show the access down to Mangerton Lane here. This is Townsend Way just finishing. The houses that were mentioned were these here. And if I just show that in relation to the first slide I had. Sorry, I've got the wrong presentation there. So those are those houses just located there. There's the application site. So that street view I've just indicated to you, those are those houses. That was taken from there, looking down to Mangerton Lane, end of Townsend Way. And in relation to, what was the other one you? Colfox. Colfox is to the south of the existing roundabout, and that's located here. So if you've got vehicles travelling from the Melplash and Beminster area, they would come down here and turn left onto Townsend Way. They wouldn't have to touch or have any impact on Sir John Colfox School, notwithstanding any vehicles that come from the south, like many other operators, and particularly operators visiting the industrial park. Then you've got some traffic that would have to go past the entrance to the school. And anywhere and everywhere outside of school, at first thing in the morning and at collection times, suffers exactly the same problems.
Thank you for that. Darren, before we go any further, your pointer's disappeared again. So if it's very good of you to try and show it on the school. I think to answer your question, Councillor Kimber, if you look at Sir John Colfox School, it is located off of the main road quite some way back. However, there will be school children in the area. Are you happy with the response? Thank you. Any other members that have technical questions, please? Councillor Borden.
Thank you. Could you possibly explain the difference between, the environmental impact assessment, which isn't applicable in this case, and the environmental permit, which is the separate legal process? Thank you.
Yes, Chairman. So, environmental impact assessment, there are two schedules to the environmental impact assessment regulations. The Schedule 1, and that is largely associated with national significant infrastructure projects. For example, HS2 would be a Schedule 1 EIA development, so that when you have to go through the planning process, a significant proposal has to be accompanied formally by what's called an environmental impact assessment. And that assesses very much like a lot of the information that's been put forward as part of the planning application, transportation issues, impact on neighbours, ecology, nature conservation, the whole remit of material planning considerations, but it's all wrapped up neatly into what's called an environmental assessment. There has to be a summary associated with that, otherwise we'd probably have a day debating the application here before us. So that's the EIA regs, and what the council does on these type of schemes is that where a proposal is within the AONB, National Landscape, that's called a sensitive area for the purposes of EIA. And we have to formally do a screening opinion, and this would be a Schedule 2 proposal. And that Schedule 2 EIA screening opinion has concluded that the environmental impact assessment requirements don't apply, notwithstanding that a lot of the technical information has had to be submitted in any event to support the planning application. So that's EIA, if I just park that. The environmental permit regulations, they're applicable and deal with the nuts and bolts of the use, effectively, in terms of odour control, etc. And in this particular instance, an environmental permit is required, as I said, to be controlled or to be the authorising body, I think, is the Environment Agency. So that's a separate regime to the planning process regime, and hence me indicating that two separation process with the Portland Port incinerator. Planning issues as well as environmental permit issues associated with the operational aspects. I hope that's answered it.
Councillor Borden, I see puzzlement on your face. We do have Stephen Horsler here, who's the Environmental Health Officer. If there's anything you can add to that, Stephen, I think Darren was quite clear, but it is a lot to take in. Thank you.
Sure. Somebody else got their microphone. Sorry, it was... into that process.
Sorry, I think it's two separate. You've done a comeback question before we finish with the first one, I think. Are you okay? Would you like Stephen to explain the environmental first, and then we'll look at the lorry, the truck movements, back to Darren afterwards? Thank you.
Sure, yes. Essentially, the environmental permitting regulations are about emissions of pollution from an ongoing facility. So whether that pollution, in the case of something like a slaughterhouse, whether it's to the ground, to water, to air, it's about emissions of pollution, including noise, and the management of that by the regulator. In this case, that would be the Environment Agency. So it's about specific things coming out of that facility that need to be regulated and controlled on an ongoing basis. Whereas I'm not an expert in EIA, but that's obviously more about the wider context of sort of meaning of the environment in its broadest sense.
Oh, sorry. I'm on now, Darren. Just a second to apologise. Everyone's really keen to get in there. Councillor Borden, does that help?
Yes, it does, but I still don't quite understand where the assessment of the greatly increased and larger lorry movements fit into the environmental impact assessment part of what we do have to do.
Well, part of the traffic aspect associated with the scheme has been via the submission of a separate transport assessment that's been considered by highways. So that's the separate aspect in relation to that.
So you're happy with that, Councillor Borden, or is there a highways question you have? No? Okay. In that case, we'll move on to, I didn't see any other hands going up. Councillor David Northern, please.
Thank you. I'd like to just continue a little bit on the transport statement. I've glanced through the details in the report, but not actually the transport statement, which is in a separate document. What I'd like to ask, it mentions in the transport statement HGVs as being the indicated maximum size of the vehicles, but it's been raised the prospect of larger vehicles than HGVs, and I wondered whether that shouldn't be considered within the transport statement, because the A3066 is a windy road, the A35 is some distance from it, and I think that would be a consideration. And I see nothing about that in the summary. It might be in the transport statement. So my question is, have larger vehicles than HGVs been considered? Thank you.
Thank you, David. Do you want to take that down? Or we do have a gentleman from Highways here, I believe, who could help if necessary. But over to you first. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to start before handing over to Highway colleagues that part of the transport statement has indicated the type of vehicles that will be visiting this particular site, and Highways have considered that in relation to their consultation response, and they're quite happy. But no doubt I'll let colleagues pick up on that issue.
Thank you, Chair. 16.5 metres is the maximum HGV. Can you hear me? 16.5 metres is the maximum length of HGV, and that's what the applicant has indicated.
Thank you very much. Councillor Northam, does that satisfy your question?
That answers the question and may lead to a condition. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll deal with conditions later, obviously. Anybody else any technical questions for the officer? No. Darren, I'd like to ask you one question. I believe there was a comment from one of the public speakers that the nearest house was 113 metres away. Do we have a sort of indication of whether that was correct, or have we actually measured it?
I haven't measured it, Chairman, but I think the access to from Townsend Way is about 200 metres. But if I just pick up on the get on the screen again, just bear with me a second. Oh, sorry, just bear with me. Yeah, so those houses that I showed following Councillor Kimber's comment are located there. The vehicle, there's an existing house there. The access to the site is roughly, I'm using the pointer again, aren't I? I do beg your pardon. I do beg your pardon. Pointer options laser. Yeah, so there's the houses there. There's the existing dwelling. The vehicle access to the site is there. That is roughly about 200 metres. I mean, if you wanted me to get it calculated, I will. But what I would say is that there is, in my view, a sufficient distance for that to be an acceptable one, based on what the Highways people have said and in their assessment of the traffic issues.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. I think also we have to bear in mind there will be a rather large acoustic fence as well from between the abattoir and any nearby housing. So I think that answers my question. Any other technical questions before we move to debate from members? I think Vice Chair has a question, so I'll pass you over.
Thank you very much, Chair. Neil Ising, Egerton Ward. I just wanted, I believe you've kind of covered these points off in the report already, but I just wanted to make sure I've completely understood in relation to the uplift of traffic movements and whether there's an overarching, I have a feeling I've read somewhere that that's 5%. So I just wanted to get a clarification on that and just confirmation as well that effectively what we're being asked to look at here is bearing in mind there are existing backstops over the existing use of the site, and that covers both the national landscape aspect and also the highways aspect, in that if this was a new application, it would look very, very different and probably be considered in a very different light. We're basically just looking, what we're being asked to consider is the difference between what would be permissible currently under the existing permission in comparison to what this additional permission would give. So just a bit of clarification on those, please.
I completely agree, and you've hit the nail on the head. So I've got nothing to contrary what you've said. You are correct in terms of your assessment about the backstop, etc. I have to say, if this site wasn't there, so all that you had was the residential edge of Bradpole, and then you had that Mangerton Lane leading on down to the countryside with no built development there. And given the further emphasis that government have placed on Dorset AONB National Landscape, the duty to conserve and preserve, I think if this were a fresh application for a brand new facility in this location, we'd be asking questions about, well, Gore Cross Industrial Estate, there's an industrial estate there, can that be appended to that existing industrial estate? Are there any other industrial areas on any of the other key employment sites that we've got in the district that the development could be accommodated? Having said that, there is that tension, I suppose, that the whole idea of having an abattoir in a rural setting, because it's feeding in inverted commas, animals that are going to a rural location rather than having to be transported into an urban industrial estate. So there's that. But I think you're right. We'd be looking at a scheme completely differently given those concerns that I've just outlined. But the fact of the matter is that existing use and that existing site exists.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation, Darren. Are you happy with that, Councillor? Yes. I think. Okay. If there are no more technical questions for the officer, then I'm quite happy for members to move to debate, please. Do we have anybody who wishes to start the debate? I'm sure there must be some, yes. I will be asking councillors individually if they have anything to say. If they don't wish to speak during the debate, you will be requested to acknowledge that you have nothing to say on it. Councillor Northern, please.
Thank you. I think that last sort of question and answer was very useful in that the principle of development is established because of the existing development, and this is an extension to the existing development. So the question then might be, is it of an appropriate size? It's just over twice as big in terms of area, working area, so it will be different to what was there before. I expressed a concern about the transport, and that's the main concern I have, in that that potentially would be different with the scaling up, and therefore I think that the conditions should include a condition that it shouldn't be any vehicle larger than an HGV servicing the plant. I think that would be an acceptable approach. So I would generally support this application moving forward, particularly because of the jobs that it brings to the area. I think that's an important consideration for our economy in Dorset, and this will, as we've also heard, benefit the local farmers as well as providing an additional 20 jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Northam. Can I move to Sorry? Yes, I was going to move to Anne Collins, please, for a comment on the condition, because I think that will struggle, but I'll pass you over to Anne.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we wouldn't be able to impose that kind of condition unless there was some kind of weight limit on the road. We can't control what vehicles go down a public highway. It wouldn't be an enforceable condition that would be appropriate to add.
Yes, thank you. I thought that would be the case. So could you please bear that in mind, Councillor Northern, when you're making your decision? It's not something that's enforceable as a condition, and I thought that was going to be the case when you proposed it. But do you wish to come back on that one?
I just wonder if we as a council can't impose conditions like that. Who can? Because there are conditions, there are weight limits on roads, 7.5 tonnes. I've seen quite a lot of time. I don't know how that relates to an HGV, but my guess is that rules out an HGV. I don't know if there are higher levels. If I could have some advice on whether it might be suitable to introduce some weight limit on the road at some later date.
Thank you. I will just move to highways just for a comment on that, please.
Thank you, Chair. If the road warranted a weight limit, it would already have one.
Thank you. Succinct and to the point, I think. Sorry, Councillor Northern. Moving on. Councillor Christopher wishes to speak.
Councillor Simon Christopher, Marshall Vale Ward. I think it's relevant to look at the context of abattoirs in Bradpole. They didn't just arrive in 1990. There's been an abattoir in and around Bradpole for 100-odd years. And it was probably very good of the Norman family to actually move the abattoir out of the old village to what I call the new site. And indeed, the butcher shop is still in Bradpole. But the point is that there are far less abattoirs than there were. I don't think there's going to be any in Hampshire. And it's very important, and this has been said before, that it will create more full-time jobs, which are at a premium. Now, the other point, and I pay tribute to Mr. Bowditch here for mentioning the lack of abattoirs and journeys, etc. Where we are at the moment is that when we're driving around Dorset, we see animals that go up the Roman Road, go all the way to Sturminster Newton. And that is not good. So if there is a local abattoir, that will be a positive thing. And if we start talking about traffic, action has been taken where necessary to promote economic growth, i.e. where the Crutchleys have a large dairy, there was a railway bridge taken down then. If speed limits need to be adjusted, that can be done. I've managed to do that in Broad Windsor with a reduction in speed limit, with the good officers working with me. But the point is, this, I believe, is a positive application, and it will have the support of the people in the majority, the silent majority of farmers who don't come and speak. And in terms of highways, I could say, well, maybe this should be turned down on highways. So we take it. So if it was turned down on highways, and I was there, the inspector would say, show me your highways qualifications, Mr. Christopher. And I don't have any. And we've heard that highways are in favour. So what grounds are there for turning it down? And if we don't support this, and it's refused, and it goes to appeal, what is a planning inspector going to think? What's a planning inspector going to think? We've got an officer saying it should be approved. We have Bridport Town Council as a body, it seems, saying it should be approved. So you can see why I'm minded to think this should go forward. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Christopher. That's very eloquent. Any other members wishing to speak in this debate, please? Councillor Kimber, and anybody else after that? Councillor Monks, thank you. Councillor Kimber.
Thank you, Chair. I will also be supporting this today. I thank you for the work that's been put in, and I'm happy enough with the distance away from the houses and the school, and plus the landscaping around there, which is, I think, quite, it's really a pleasure to see this. I want to thank the farmers for coming forward today. An important issue was raised. I know it's not part of the planning, but the welfare of the livestock was important, and the thought of having our livestock going to Devon and Cornwall, which could be quite a horrendous journey. So that gives me, if you like, much more reason to support this. And largely, I welcome the jobs. It's not very often we can say that in a planning meeting, but I welcome the jobs that are going to be created. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kimber. Councillor Monks, please.
Hi, Chair. Councillor Craig Monks, Bedminster Ward. I'll keep my comments short because I'm just getting over a bout of tonsillitis. But just to follow on from Councillor Christopher, my neighbour in Broad Windsor, I don't have anything further really to add to what's already been said, other than that I'm happy to propose that we accept this application with the conditions as laid out. But I'm aware that you will want to speak to some other councillors if they have any other further to add.
Thank you, Councillor Monks. Anybody else? We have a proposer. Do we have a seconder? David Northam? For the benefit of the members of the public, Councillor Northam has seconded that proposal. I will park that for a second just to make sure that members have finished with their debates before we go to the vote. Are councillors happy that they have enough information to make an informed decision, and you wish me to close the debate and go to the vote? I'm seeing nods of assent. In that case, just bear with me. We're just at the last minute there. We have an interjection from the planning officer.
I just want to add that there are the additional plan on the updated list and the additional condition regarding the implementation of the screen to be included as part of the recommendation. So it's as per the paper plus those two little bits of the update.
Thank you for that, Darren. Members are clear on that? You don't? Okay, I'd forgotten that, so I do apologise. In that case, all those in favour of the officer's proposal as written and the conditions, the extras, all those in favour, hands up, please. We have a unanimous decision, isn't it? Oh, sorry, I do apologise. I couldn't see you there. Councillor Borden?
I'm quite exercised on this one, so I'm going to abstain.
Okay, so we have one abstention and the rest are in favour. Have you noted, Josh? Lovely, thank you very much. So that concludes item 5 on the agenda. We now move to item 6, which is P/VOC/2024/06716. I'll just pause until the members of the public leave. For the benefit of the members of the public, the meeting is adjourned while we try to find a councillor who's left the chamber. Thank you. Okay, we're now in a position to proceed at 11:30. I'll start item 6 again. It's P/VOC/2024/06716 Weymouth Beach, the Esplanade. It's presented by Darren Rogers. We have 2 councillors that have moved across to speak as ward members. I believe they're Councillor Weller and Councillor Northam. Otherwise, the committee is as was. Over to you, please, Darren. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just do 2 things with regards to this slideshow. I'll also change the pointer. There we go. Yeah, so this is an application for a variation of condition application following a 2018 planning permission granted by the former Weymouth and Portland Council, which varied condition 2 regarding the size and location details of various facilities, which in itself was a variation of an original 2010 referenced application for the arrangement and design of various beach attractions and kiosks. It's effectively seeking to combine attraction sites A3 and A4 with a new site, sorry, there is an existing A3, A4 and A5 site that's all going to be amalgamated as one, and then there will be another A6 site which will also provide for an observation stroke Ferris wheel. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the site as existing. The red line, as you can imagine, is quite extensive along the Esplanade. And what I've shown on the screen is also the existing schedule that talks about each of the areas, so SC1, 2, 3 and 4, R1, 2, etc., A2, etc., H, which all relate to a location opposite various premises on the Esplanade, and then the dimension of the permitted areas that attractions can be provided, and in some cases in relation to their height restriction, because as you can well imagine, with the Town Council issuing licences to various operators, we would want to permit a height of a particular height rather than each individual dimension for each individual operator. So the site as existing runs effectively from the War Memorial to the north, in terms of the red line, all the way south to the site adjacent to the Sand Modeller, near to Alexandra Gardens. But it's effectively, it's this lower end to which the major changes are intended to be proposed. What I've shown on screen is that this area here, which is the A3 and A4 as existing, will be removed. And then there will be a new A3, A4, A5 facility located here. And the observation Ferris wheel is intended to be located next to the Sand Modeller, opposite or near to Alexandra Gardens, located here. That in itself comprises of changes to the approved schedule, so that the revised schedule would be that highlighted in red on your screen. So A3, A4, A5 would be combined opposite Bond Street to be 60 metres by 25 metres, and A6, which is where the Ferris observation wheel is intended to be, will be 18 by 18 metres. And that's in order to accommodate a typical example that I've shown here, which was submitted by the applicant, the Town Council and their agents, indicating the kind of facility that they're intended to provide, which was based on Skegness. So that that's the kind of seaside facility that's intended to be provided for Weymouth. There's a recommendation, as is set out on that screen, that and the other beachside attractions are removed from the site in the winter months. That was something that was indicated to be permanently, as part of the original submission, a permanent solution, but following consultation with Historic England, particularly given the sensitive designation of the whole of the Esplanade from a heritage aspect, with the site being part of the conservation area of the frontage and the number of listed buildings that are established along the Esplanade. Historic England suggested that consideration ought to be given to the removal between those aforementioned dates. And that's picked up on as part and parcel of the recommendation. Again, typical example of a observation wheel, similar to this kind of facility, but no higher than 33 metres, and there'll be at least one accessible gondola for access for disabled persons, white in colour. The submission indicated no formal concrete foundations will be required, but it will need to sit on a flat and level surface, should I say, of the beach. This shows the highlighted area where the main southern changes would take place, and I've included this screen because, or this slide, because it shows the application site in red, shows the buildings that are listed in a browny orangey colour. Buildings of local interest are in the kind of turquoise blue colour, and then the shading is the washing over of the town centre conservation area. That shows it in a bit more detail, and you can see the sand modeller located here. This is the area where the observation wheel would be effectively provided. And that picks up on the earlier slide that I had that shows where that change is intended to be. Here's a few photographs. So that's the existing sand modeller structure. So I haven't taken photos of the whole of the esplanade, bearing in mind that the changes are effectively at this southern end. But this effectively shows you, so there's the edge of the sand modeller. This is where the observation wheel would be. It's intended to be parallel to the esplanade rather than jutting out perpendicular there too, where I think the impact would be greater. Again, this is looking back here, back towards Alexandra Gardens, set behind the sand modeller. And there's one of the kind of upturned hall cafe kiosks that would be retained, and the various other facilities which are issued on seasonal licences by the Town Council would continue. And of course, they're not there. I took these photographs in December or January when they were largely taken away outside of the summer season. And again, that shows you effectively where the location of the wheel would be. Some of the key issues that are outlined in the report is the principle. Well, that's considered acceptable because there's a number of existing seaside attractions already there. Impact on the design, character and appearance of the area, that's considered to be less than substantial harm in heritage asset terms. But we need to consider any public benefits arising, and of course we consider that there would be public benefits in the attraction seeking potential additional visitors that has an economic benefit to the wider town. It's not considered that there would be significant adverse living conditions affected by reason of neighbouring occupants and neighbouring properties, particularly given the existence of the beachside attractions and the fact that Weymouth in the summer months in particular, is generally well patronaged, shall we say, in terms of people on holiday. And likewise, the heritage assets, which I've just explained, are considered to be acceptable. Flood risk and drainage issues, no adverse impact arising from that, given that what's proposed is a water-compatible flood risk use. Clearly economic benefits as a result of the potential for anticipated increased visitor numbers. I think we had this when we had the tower at the end of the peninsula at one stage with Merlin. That was granted permission for a time-limited period. And then because the council's moved to want to do and regenerate that site, it's since been removed. And no adverse impacts from highways. So on that basis, Chairman, it's recommended for approval, subject to the conditions and informatives are set out in para 18 of the report. If I just stop screening just stop sharing for a second. There is a condition on the original permission requiring details of a specification of the construction of the wheel that automatically follows forward as part and parcel of any decision made, because I am aware that we've had a late representation about the construction capability of the wheel. I think officers take the view that that's largely a matter for the Town Council to be satisfied, along with their own health and safety input in relation to their liabilities to ensure it's a safe structure, But from a planning point of view, Chairman, we're quite satisfied.
Thank you very much, Darren. Could you pop your recommendation back on the screen for us? You may have to move away from it during the meeting, but it's good to see it up there. Josh, for the minutes, could you please note, I forgot to state that Councillor Louise Bown left the room before the commencement of item 6 due to... and Councillor Louis O'Leary also have left. I think this is due to the Weymouth Town Council meeting last night. So if we could have both of those noted. We're just about quorate, I think, aren't we? In that case, I'd now move over to public speakers, please. The first one objecting, I have Jared Tiller. You have 3 minutes. I'll give you a warning at 2 minutes 30. Thank you.
Good morning, members of the Planning Committee. I'm here to object to 2 key elements of this proposal: the placement of the observation wheel on A6 and the combination of A3, A4 and A5 into a single tender area. Firstly, the planning report states that no concrete foundations will be required for this wheel and only matting will be required. However, Lamber Inc., who are a manufacturer of observation wheels, have confirmed that their 33-metre observation wheel, which is similar to the Scagness observation wheel, weighs 56 tonnes and if not placed on a hard paved surface, on a hard paved location, will need extra support. Their 33-metre observation wheel rests on 8 main supports, each carrying a weight of 19.6 tonnes. Loose sand can only safely support about 10 tonnes per metre squared, so each support would likely need a foundation of about 4.5 by 4.5 metres in size to evenly distribute the weight and ensure stability. If foundations are required, then the environmental and structural impact has not been properly assessed. If they are not provided where needed, there is a significant risk to safety and stability. Additionally, the proposal does not account for the size constraints of A6. The site measures 18 by 18 metres, yet Lamber Inc. have confirmed that their 33-metre wheel, which is similar to the Scagness wheel, requires a footprint of 21 by 17 metres. This suggests the wheel will not fit without encroaching on neighbouring attractions. The Weymouth Super Snails have been a fixture on the seafront for 25 years, providing a unique and much-loved attraction for families. The report suggests the operator can reapply under a new tender. However, combining sites A3, A4 and A5 into a single tender significantly reduces the chances of the Super Snails securing a lease, as it favours larger operators over smaller independent businesses. This approach limits opportunities for local traders, reduces diversity, and changes the character of Weymouth's beach attractions. Given the misleading information on foundations, the unsuitable size site, the loss of a long-standing attraction, the 38 objections, and the reduced opportunities for small businesses, I urge the committee to reject this application or at least reconsider the approach to combining A3, A4, and A5. With so many unanswered questions about safety, suitability and fairness, is this really a proposal the committee can confidently support? Thank you.
Thank you. I thought you were going to finish in time, so I just let you go there. The next speaker is Mr. Palousis. Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, members of the committee. Today I am objecting against this application. I don't think it will look good and I believe it will have a negative impact on the beach. The people are coming to Weymouth Beach to use the beach and the existing attractions. Installing something new of this stature would obviously be a negative impact. I've looked into it and the photos and the technical details that have been passed on to Dan Rogers are completely inaccurate. If we're looking at the 25-metre wheel that's proposed in the drawing, we can clearly see that the actual footprint of the attraction is almost 17 metres. That means just the attraction. You need to consider at least 1.5 metre safety area around the attractions, not for people to go onto it. And that directly increases the size to over 20 meters on one length of it, and the width will probably go to 15. Yet that doesn't encompass the kiosk for the selling the tickets and operating it. That's a 25 meters. But if we look at the 33 meter proposed height limit, again, this will go to a 21 meter by 17 footprint. And if we're looking at putting that fence and areas to secure the structure, we're looking again another 3 meters, thus taking us to 24 meters by 20 meter. Yet the site again, it's not suitable. On that basis, my question is today, how can you put this 21 by 17 meter alleged structure on a site that's barely making it on 18 by 18? How can you make that happen? On that basis, I do please urge you to reject this application as it's not fit for purpose. Thank you.
Microphone. Thank you very much for that. We now have Mr. Jessup, I believe.
Good morning, everybody. I'm noisy enough without these things. My objection to this proposal is I speak as a resident of Weymouth, somebody who most days walks down the promenade and looks and sees what tourists see when they visit this site. Recently, an internet survey indicated 50,000 plus people voted Weymouth in the top 5 beach resorts. We're turning it into a fun fair. This is not what people come to Weymouth for. Ride costs on a machine this big are significant. You can almost hear the families with children, the kids, I want to go, I want to go, I want to go. It's not what they come here for. We will drive people away. Moreover, as Jared has rightly pointed out to you, there are structural considerations that this does not bring into account. My view is that this is being salami sliced based on what WTC know and at this moment understand. They will be coming back again when, as Mr. Palousis has said, they find out they can't have that rights there because of this, or you can't get foundations in there. We've all seen Weymouth Beach after high winds and a high tide. All the sand's up the top end. That kind of ride is not going to tolerate it in an engineering sense. It's a very serious piece of kit. The rest of it is down to communication. I've lived in this town 35 years. Until Mr. Palousis told me about this, this was the first time I'd heard that Weymouth Town Council were restructuring beach amenities to increase revenue by having large rides at the exclusion of small rides. Small rides should be impact assessed compared to the big ride. Things have been said about the snails can retender. Well, there needs to be evidence for that, because if you merge the 3 sites, there is no place for them. They are too small to occupy a site of 3 other sites located and merged. So, excuse me, as I said, my conclusion of this is that it's ill-considered, it's not fully thought through. There will be further applications to vary planning consents previously given, or even to modify this one to fit whatever device it is that the council choose with their partners to bring in. But somebody mentioned it in the presentation, I think it was the officer. You remember the Sky Tower, what happened with it?
Thank you very much for that. We now have Charmaine Denny, Assistant Town Clerk of Weymouth Town Council, who is the applicant, and I believe David Northam wishes to speak as an adjoining ward member. And I've been asked whether I will allow that, and I will in this instance. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
As you know, Weymouth Town Council is seeking to vary the conditions of the existing planning permission in order to improve the management and layout of beach attractions, which have been a vital part of the seafront's offering for both residents and visitors. The proposed changes aim to reduce clutter across the beach, a concern that was raised during our seafront strategy consultation in 2023. This is something we take seriously as we strive to balance the need for attractions with the importance of maintaining a pleasant environment for all beach users. Our proposals include relocating and consolidating the attractions located at the sites of A3, A4 and A5 into one unified site that would span 60 metres by 25 metres. This new configuration would not only make better use of the available space, but also allow for a more themed and cohesive approach to the attractions. By focusing both on vintage and modern elements, we aim to create an experience that appeals to a wide range of ages, aligning with our seafront strategy, which was adopted by our council, Weymouth Town Council, in January 2024, and prioritises quality attractions whilst ensuring that the beach does not become overcrowded. An additional siting element of the proposal is the inclusion of the observation wheel on the site, as discussed by the other members of the public. I think it's worth noting that, subject to contracting, following our committee meeting last night, the proposed structure would be a base of 17 metres by 12 metres, and it's 26 metres high. The proposed observation wheel would have an accessible gondola, and we feel that this would make it an attractive and inclusive offering for families and older visitors. The wheel would complement the aesthetic of the seafront, providing an iconic new feature without the need for intrusive concrete foundations. While these changes represent a significant enhancement to the overall attraction offering, I would like to address a concern that has been raised on numerous occasions regarding the potential loss of the snail ride. This ride, which has historically operated on either sites A3 and A6, holds a special place for many who have visited Weymouth Beach. However, it is important to note that the licence for the snail ride to operate expired in October 24, and for the last 4 years has only been operating on short-term licences. That being said, we understand and acknowledge the affection many have for the snail ride and the nostalgia it evokes. While this ride is not part of the planning permission at hand, we continue to focus on maintaining high-quality, family-friendly attractions on the beach, and this will remain a priority moving forward. The proposal before you today reflects the outcome of extensive consultation with over 2,500 responses from residents and visitors that fed into the Council's seafront strategy. The feedback was invaluable in shaping our approach, and we are confident that the changes will not only improve the seafront's aesthetic and operational efficiency, but also enhance the experience for all visitors to Weymouth.
Thank you very much for that. Now I'm going to allow adjoining ward members just to speak. Special occasion, a minute and a half each, please. So between you, you've got 3 minutes. Councillor Northam first, followed by Councillor Weller. 3, 2, 1, go.
Thank you, Chair. My ward is 2 kilometres away from the seafront attraction, just to make that clear. And I'm a regular visitor to the seafront, as are residents and visitors. What I'd like to point out is that within the existing conservation area description, it says that the area has various entertainment and amenity features, including fairground rides. That's what's in the conservation statement. That dates back to, I'm not quite sure when. I've been down here for 38 years and there's always been fairground rides on the seafront. So it's not an exception in that respect. I think there's some interesting questions being raised about the engineering, but I'm not sure that's a planning matter. The other thing I'd like to point out that wasn't highlighted by Darren was that the Alexandra Gardens site is a site for fairground attractions as well as amusement arcades. So it's actually in the area most appropriate from that perspective. I think for me the deciding factor is the change at having a new attraction coming to the Weymouth seafront. It's something we've been looking for. And so I would support this application if I were able to, but I accept that I'm not. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Northam. Councillor Weller, 1 minute 30 as well for you, please.
Very much, Councillor Kate Weller. I'm the ward member for Wyke and Rodwell, which runs right down to the harbour, so I'm practically on the beach. Firstly, there have been calls for an observation wheel from a huge number of residents for very, very many years. Indeed, that's what they wanted rather than the tower. So it's not something that isn't needed or wanted. More particularly, we did a review on how we could greater enhance and improve the offer that we make on the seafront. And among that was the idea of consolidating the sites on the sands itself, on the beach. Those of you who know the site will walk along the prom. It's more of a ribbon along the prom of attractions. That means spaces between, which can be camped on. People can sit there all day long, but they're unacceptably close to the rides very often. By consolidating these sites, we actually create greater wide spaces for those people who don't want to use the entertainment, simply want to sit on the beach with their lounges and windbreaks and so on. So actually, this will enhance the offer that we give, whilst giving some new ideas on entertainment, some of the old standard ones. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Weller. That concludes the public speaking. Over to you, Darren. Is there any points you wish to come back on there? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, the only couple of points I'd like to make is that we're not approving a 33-metre high observation wheel here. We're approving an observation wheel no higher than 33 metres on an area of 18 metres by 18 metres. That's the applicant's proposal. It's not the council's proposal. That's what the applicant has put forward. They've said A5 will be, A6 will be 18 by 18 and an observation wheel of no higher than 33 metres. So if they realise when they go out to tender that they can't get an observation wheel within the 18 metres by 18 metres, then they would need to come back and have a look at the amending the application, whether that would be a non-material amendment or whether it will be a significant material amendment to require a fresh application. The issues associated with the snail wheel, the snail ride, should I say, that's listed in 1617 of the report. I've gone into detail in relation to that, and that's effectively a town council issue in relation to the various licences that they give for people to operate rides. And just in terms of construction, what I would say is that if I call it the mothership application, because this is a variation, did incorporate condition 5, which is reciprocated in the papers, and that does require detailed drawings and specifications showing the design, construction and colour scheme of any new built structure, including the proposed Ferris wheel, to be submitted and approved, so it's covered in terms of construction via that aspect.
Thank you for that, Darren. That's very helpful. Members, technical questions, please, for the officer, if you have any. Councillor Kimber.
Councillor Paul Kimber, Portland. It's been noted today, or there has been concern about the foundations. Are we able to... Yeah, oh, sorry. Councillor Paul Kimber, Portland. It's been noted today the public concern on the foundations. Are we able to comment on this particular area, the foundations of the wheel? Thank you.
I think my last comment answered that question, that condition 5, there's a condition there that requires design, construction and colour scheme. So the construction in terms of foundations will be covered by condition 5.
Yes, I take your point, Darren. That does seem to cover that issue. It's one I had myself, so I was going to ask the same thing. So thank you, Councillor Kimber. Any other councillors with Councillor Roper, please?
Thank you, Chair. Pete Roper, Ward Member for Portland. There's been some discussion about the wheel and regarding foundations and also the size of the footprint and whether it is actually sort of part of the sort of the plan application decision itself. But we seem to be getting sort of conflicting sort of comments as to whether sort of foundations are required, whether they're not, whether matting is adequate, and also there's also contradictions about the size of the footprint for this area. So So really, it is difficult to make a decision while we're having these, with these conflicting statements. So my question is, do we know for certain, will there be concrete foundations, and do we know for certain whether the footprint will be as specified?
My answer to that, Chairman, is that you have before you what the applicant has provided to us. You have an area of 18 by 18. You have their indication that the Ferris wheel will be no higher than 33 metres. You've also heard from the Town Council what the kind of height it may well be, which is 25 metres. Bearing in mind that the condition requires the structure to be taken away each or over the winter period, I doubt very much whether there will be formal concrete foundations provided to support it. As I've said, there are many of these type of facilities that pop up over the Christmas period. London, Birmingham, Manchester, many of our significant cities have these where they are significant size and they sit on the ground by way of the ballast that they provide, and they have the necessary supports there too, in order that they're not permanent features, because they are then packed up and away they go somewhere else. So condition 5.6.2 deal with that in any event, but I'd be very surprised whether any formal concrete foundations are necessary, given the fact that the structure will need to be taken away over the winter months.
Yes, thank you, Darren. Could you pop your recommendation back on the screen as well? I think members are slightly going off track here a bit. I was concerned about safety as well, but I do take your point that we're being asked to vote on a particular thing, and that it may well come back to committee should there be a change in the specifications. So we need to bear that in mind. Councillor Christopher, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Simon Christopher, Marshwood Vale Ward. This is really a question, I think, for perhaps the legal officer. I'm always in favour of striking a compromise. And can I have some explanation as to whether we could actually vary the details on page 70 around citing, where it seems to me as if this application involves the citing for 2/3 of the year. Is it possible for us to vary that? I.e., when we go about the county of Dorset, we often see road signs prohibiting people parking from the 1st of May to the 30th of September. Where exactly does the figure of, or at least the line 1st of March to the 31st of October come from? That's my first question, whether we could actually have this cited for no more than, say, 6 months, because clearly there is a concern in respect of the conservation area, listed buildings, etc. And it doesn't seem to be much of a compromise if it's going to be there potentially 2/3 of the year. So that is a very salient question that I would like an answer to. And my second point is, as you probably gather from earlier, I perhaps come from the world of agriculture and farming. And very often when people put in applications to do things, they do things on a temporary basis. I think of mobile homes on farms, etc. And people are given 3 years permission. Can we have a time-limited application so that people can actually assess the implication of this over the course of, say, 2 or 3 years? Is it possible that the legal officer could reply to my concerns? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Christopher. I think that can go back to Darren Rogers to start with, and perhaps Anne Collins if necessary from a planning point of view. We'll let Hannah have a rest. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think in terms of the first comment and the variation of condition in the winter months, the variation of condition has to be read that's a brand new planning permission that's effectively being issued, and the council are at liberty to attach conditions that they feel are necessary to limit the development. And the issue about the facility for the Ferris wheel in particular be removed in the winter months, that's come about through consultation with Historic England. We've held pre-application discussion with the applicant that occurred this time last summer. So they've been fully informed of Historic England's viewpoint. So that is a valid thing that we can do, in my view. In terms of a temporary planning permission, as an example, for 3 years, well, the facility won't be there for half the year in any event. The intention is that it will be removed over the winter periods. And I am aware that the existing, the former Merlin Tower was granted on a temporary permission basis, part of which was to assess its wider visual impact, etc., etc. But I think we've got enough before you at the moment to assess that visual impact. It has been assessed via Historic England, whose only comment has been not a temporary permission but removal in the winter periods, and therefore on that basis the scheme is considered to be acceptable, Chairman.
Councillor Christopher, I think that sort of covers your points, but obviously I'll give you the opportunity to come back.
Well, I don't think it really does cover what I'm saying, because the officer said it's going to be taken away for half a year, when clearly it's only going to be taken away for a third of a year. And I think it's incumbent on committee members to listen to what local people have to say and the fact that there are genuine concerns and interpret what is potentially necessary. I understand people might turn around and say, well, it's absolutely terrific. It might be in place in October half term, etc., under those particular dates. But I just think it's better to reach a compromise and go for 6 months rather than 2/3 of a year. And I hope my colleagues are listening.
I'll refer this to Anne Collins, please. Anne, would you like to come back on that one thing? I think.
Thank you, Chair. Members could go for a different period to the period stated in the condition if they felt it was necessary to do so, but it has to be necessary. I suggest that probably the March, the end of October, is to basically encompass the Easter school holidays and the October half term, because obviously, you know, planning policies and the council as a whole supports that economic growth and extending the tourism season. So I think, you know, if we consider the impact on the setting of the listed buildings, the conservation area to be broadly okay for March to October, why would we really want it removed sooner? Because you're kind of losing those wider tourism and economic benefits. So members would have to be very clear of what their rationale were if they were to amend that condition. And if they were going to amend the condition, I would suggest it was only in respect of the observation wheel, because I can't see that members would particularly want the other attractions removed when they've already all been there for that kind of period every year anyway.
Yes, thank you for that, Anne. Back to Councillor Christopher. Are you suggesting that you want an amendment to the application? And if so, you'll have to seek a seconder on this one. I'm not sure that we're going down the right road here, but obviously members do have the opportunity to do this. Councillor Monks.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Monks, Bedminster Ward. Just to follow on from Councillor Christopher's points, I do in principle agree with the balance he's trying to strike, but I think maybe just to help his point and maybe wider council, and this may sound like a bit of a silly question, which is when local members would be useful, is similar attractions along the beach. I know when I take my two boys to Waffleicious, one of my favourite places in Weymouth, the Helter Skelter, or the I don't know what you call it, the kind of slidey thing when you climb in a potato sack, that tends to sort of go up at some point in the year and then come down. What's those dates? And maybe that would make sense to sort of tie in with the point that Councillor Christopher makes, because then we might be trying to go into a realm of fairness to residents, but unfairness to individual storeholders and local businesses. Maybe that might help the debate.
Those are the dates, as is set out in the report. So those are the dates. So we would be consistent. In that respect, we'd be consistent.
Okay, we'll just carry on with debate, members. Does anybody want to speak to the potential amendment or anything else? Councillor Borden, sorry.
Yeah, Belinda Borden, I'm Regis in Charmouth. So what was the answer on Councillor Christopher's second point about the possibly limiting it to 3 years with review?
Anne, did you want to reply? Because I think it was yours.
Chair, there would have to be some kind of justification. We do sometimes limit things to temporary because we need to kind of assess their impacts, or, for instance, agricultural workers' dwellings, where we'd expect it to come forward with a permanent dwelling if they were successful in due course. I think on this case, sometimes we limit things where there's going to be more of an environmental impact that we can't easily assess through the application. But this one, clearly, the kind of impacts are visual impacts. We've been given an example of a similar wheel. We've got maximum dimensions. We've actually heard from Town Council today that the maximum dimensions aren't likely to be achieved at probably a smaller wheel. So we know what it's going to look like. We can make that assessment now in terms of the impact on the setting of the listed building of the conservation area. And therefore, I don't feel there'd be justification. If members consider that impact to be acceptable, there would be no justification, in my view, just to give it a temporary consent.
Thank you for that advice. Here goes your councillor again. Councillor Christopher, I think that the officer is actually saying that there needs to be a justification for that variation in condition. And they're content with the appearance, etc., of it already. So back to you to see what you want to do on this one.
Well, one is minded to regard Weymouth Beach as a huge asset to Dorset. It gets so much coverage and comment about it being such a brilliant beach, etc. But there's also the historic buildings, etc. I know Historic England have actually reported on that. But do we have any indication as to whether we have a lengthy report or when Historic England actually came to the site to assess that, i.e. just to reassure residents? I think residents need reassurance clearly that this isn't detrimental to Weymouth. It might bring in some tourists, but other people might be repelled by it. So I would be interested to know when the people from Historic England arrived, and do we actually have a detailed report on file?
Thank you. I'll pass back to Darren on this one. We are wandering around here. We're going to have to make a decision sooner or later rather than just backwards and forwards. So, Darren, please, could you respond to that?
Very clear, Chairman. The report sets out that there was a pre-application submission to the council, which pre-applications are confidential, so they don't get publicised. But I can confirm to committee that last August, on a baking hot day, during the week, I met with the applicant who is sat in this chamber today, her agent, Debbie Redding, former of this parish, and myself, and Historic England, Eve van der Steen. We met out on site on a lovely summer afternoon to consider the merits or otherwise of the proposal. And in terms of Historic England's response, all of that is detailed on the planning application associated with this that's been summarised in my report, Chairman. And on that basis, they're content that the visual impact of the Ferris wheel is acceptable, but like with other structures, they want it to be taken away in the dates that I've indicated in the report. And just in terms of the recommendation, the update sheet just adds some clarification to those areas. It's just bits of wording, but you just need to add that as part and parcel of your of the recommendation as well, Chairman.
So, Councillor Christopher, Historic England have met, and there's been pre-application discussions. We're walking into the realms of challenging consultees again here about things that we perhaps sometimes have to let the experts lead us on. Do you wish to make an amendment, or are you happy to continue for debate?
We continue the debate and to allow other committee members to reflect on what I've said.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other members wishing to speak? Technical questions? Yeah.
Chair, fellow councillors, Paul Kimber, Portland. To move things along, I'm going to move the recommendation as set out in 18. I'm not sure if I would declare an interest, but I had a ride on the London Eye, and in the winter, and it was fantastic to see the views. And I think it will be on this occasion that we'll be able to see the views across the bay. Weymouth, has already been said, is a fantastic resort. And I think we've got to really be able to cater for our holiday makers and young people. And it is a lot of young people do come down to Weymouth. There's going to be, I believe, economic benefits, and I believe that's something that we have to take in consideration. I asked the planners about the foundations, and I'm satisfied that you've got that particularly right. So therefore, Chair, I move.
Yes, Councillor Kimmer. Does that include the details on the update sheet that came through as well? You're happy with that recommendation as set out plus the update sheet?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. We'll continue the debate, or seek a seconder first. Is there a seconder? Councillor Roper, I think, is the seconder. So could we continue with the debate? I'll park that for the time being, just in case there's any difference of opinion. Anybody wish to speak? Councillor Borden.
Yeah, I think I would have, my main concerns will be about the safety and the issues that have been raised here, but as planning officers explained, that's taken care of in condition 5. And I'm minded to agree with the assessments that Weymouth Town Council have made. They've undertaken resident survey, and this attraction and the concentration of attractions in one area, enabling more of the rest of the beach to be enjoyed as just a sandy beach, strikes me as a good idea, and they seem to have got quite a lot of feedback. And yeah, I think it's going to be attractive to all of us in Dorset as well, potentially, as long as the safety measures are assured.
Yes, thank you very much. Anybody else wish to speak? At the moment, we have a proposal and a seconder. So if there's nobody else wishing to speak, then I'll seek a vote, please, by a show of hands. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation and the update sheet? I think we have. That's 6-4, and I believe there'll be Councillor Christopher. Councillor Christopher's abstaining. Thank you. In that case, it is the officer's recommendation is approved. Thank you all for that one. We'll now move to item 7, application P/2024/07499. Hardy House, Castle Road, Portland, DT51AU. We just pause the meeting for the councillors that left the room to come back in. In fact, I'll declare a comfort break for 5 minutes, so the meeting will be adjourned Ready? Okay. Right. The meeting's now back in progress. We're moving to item 7, which is P/2024/07499 Hardy House, Castle Road, Portland, DT5 1AU. Presented by Steve Tapscott, and there are no public speakers on this item. Over to you, Steve, for your presentation, please.
Apologies, Chairman, just a couple of technical difficulties, but I think we're there. Brilliant. Okay, thank you. So there's an application at Hardy House, Castle Road in Portland. I'll show you a location plan in a moment so you can get your bearings. And it's a fairly simple one for a brick enclosure for electrical supply meters. So here we are. It's within the defined development boundary of Portland, right next to the community hospital. And if I just quickly run through some of the constraints for you, it's within Underhill Conservation Area. Here's an excerpt of the map, and there's the site there. So you can see just beneath it, there's a dot. That dot signifies that it's an important local building. This dotted red line around it, the hospital and the two buildings to the south, means it's part of an important building group. So therefore, our conclusion is that this is what we call a non-designated heritage asset, and it has group value with those other assets within that dotted line. And also just here to the south is what's called a view shed, which is an area that offers views basically across Chesil and the harbour, and it does encompass the application site as well. In common with a lot of Portland, the site is washed over by a designation for its important geological and geomorphological qualities, and also its archaeological potential. Just to the north of the site, within the hospital grounds, is a medium pressure gas pipeline. This is Dorset Council-owned land, which is why it's come to committee for determination today. And for additional context, committee decided an application in November 2023 for the conversion of this building, which was at that point a hostel, and it has now become 5 residential units, and works are well underway. You'll see that on my photographs in a minute. And something to bear in mind, I'll come back to this in a little bit, but there are approved plans with that 2023 permission for a fence. So, quickly show you some pictures of the site. So this is from the vehicular access. So, see where my dot is looking towards the building. It's shrouded at the moment in scaffolding, because, like I said, works are well underway. This second photo is just adjacent to the building, looking, I guess, in an easterly direction towards where the proposed development would go. This is from the opposite side, and you can see just here, pretty much where that orange colour is, that's where the electricity meter box would go. And this last photo is slightly further back, and I provided that just to show you the relationship with these trees. So because we're in a conservation area, these trees will have a degree of statutory protection. They're on third-party adjacent land, but you can see that they're set behind this embankment here and behind the fencing, and the development itself would go on an area of hard standing down here at slightly lower level. So it's just something to bear in mind. Here are the proposed plans. Not an awful lot I can say about it, really. It's It would go just to the north of the building. The architect has quite helpfully put on an extract from the approved flat plans, the ground floor flat. You can see that it would be in the direct line of sight of the bathroom, but that's a habitable room, so it's not something we'd really be worried about. The habitable room here, the bedroom, its outlet would continue to be unobstructed by the meter box. And you'll recall a moment ago I mentioned a fence. Well, it's just here. So it's partially within our application red line, but it's already been approved. And as I said, it's 1.8 metres high, just to the west of the development. So the proposed plans, quick canter through, it's proposed in brick. And the brick would match the main building. These would be composite doors, and it would have a ply membrane roof. From this side, from the east elevation, you can see the approved fence along here. It's on slightly lower ground, so that's why it looks a bit low compared with the new structure. And that's it from the west elevation. So in terms of key considerations, the principle of development, well, it's in the defined development boundary, as I said, where the Portland local plan and the Portland neighbourhood plan and our local plan both support development in principle, and this would relate to the implemented position for the flats conversion going on the wider site. As I said earlier, this is a non-designated heritage asset, so we need to consider what those impacts would be, both on the asset itself and the wider conservation area. Our conclusion is that it would be located discreetly in a gap just to the north of the main building. The building is quite large and it steps downwards, and so this would be the next logical step. So we feel that the design and scale are both acceptable and no demonstrable harm would arise to the character appearance of the conservation area or the setting of non-designated heritage assets. In terms of residential amenity, the excerpt I showed you just earlier with the relationship and the flat at the ground floor level, we're happy with that. It wouldn't demonstrably harm the outlook for that flat. It would probably be visible, but it wouldn't be right in front of the window, and it wouldn't block out a harmful amount of natural light. There are no other properties nearby that would be affected either. Highways impacts, well, it wouldn't affect the access and it wouldn't affect any parking. Archaeology, it's on an existing hard surface, so it's likely that any archaeological interest will have already been disturbed. Plus, given the nature of this proposal, it's likely to have very shallow footings. And our archaeologist has raised no objections to the application. Geology, again, because this is previously developed land, it's likely that any geological interest will have already been disturbed. With the medium pressure pipeline to the north, we consulted Scottish and Southern Electricity, and they're happy with the relationship. With the trees I mentioned, because they are on that third-party land beyond that embankment, the tree roots will most likely be predominantly within that embankment at a decent enough distance away from the development that we're satisfied there wouldn't be any impact on those third-party trees. And lastly, ecology and biodiversity. And again, in terms of ecology, we haven't received any ecological reports because it's below our threshold for needing one. There is a record of a West European hedgehog being found in the local area. But given the scale of development, I shouldn't imagine that this would particularly impact on that hedgehog or hedgehogs if there are more than one. So we're happy in that respect. And with BNG, it is below the de minimis threshold for needing to demonstrate a net gain in biodiversity. So it's not applicable. So the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to two conditions. The standard time limit is the first one, and the second one is to approve the proposed plans. And those proposed plans include labels of the proposed materials, so we can ensure that the brick will be matching, which we think is an important consideration. So that's the end of my presentation, Chairman. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Steve, for that. Members, technical questions, please. There are no speakers, so it's straight over to you. Are there any? No. Councillor Monks?
Don't panic, Chair. I just got in after you said no technical, and I was going to come forward and say I'm happy to propose that we adopt with the conditions as lined out.
Yeah, that's fine. Obviously, we have moved to debate, so I'll take that as a proposal. We'll continue the debate, members, to see how the rest of you feel. Councillor Weller, please.
Second and go to the vote, please.
Okay, Councillor Borden, you had your hand up.
No, I was just going to second, and it seems fairly straightforward.
Okay, thank you. Unless anybody else wishes to speak, I'm happy to move to the vote. So all those in favour of the recommendation that was on the screen but is gone. I believe that is... Councillor Bowen was late into the room. We just restarted, so thank you very much. So that's unanimous of those that are able to vote. Could you just note, Josh, that Councillor Bowen just missed the beginning of that presentation, therefore she sat silently through it. Thank you. Right, we now move to item 8. P/PPRD/2024/07247, 9 to 11 High Street, Fortuneswell, Portland, DT5 1JQ. And again, presentation by Steve Tapscott. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'm just, is that working? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So yes, 9 to 11 High Street, Fortuneswell, and this is the demolition only of a pair of semi-detached dwellings at numbers 9 to 11. The location is shown here. Hopefully you can see, is my dot working again? Oh, you can see, can you see my mouse there? Okay, well, I'll just use the arrow here, if that's all right. So this is down the one-way street, the High Street, going as you exit Fortuneswell. Behind the application site is the Hambro car park. It's within the defined development boundary of Portland in Underhill Conservation Area. And if I show you the map of the conservation area appraisal, it gives some quite useful context. So again, in common with the previous application, it's got the dotted line around it. So our site is right at the end of this important group of buildings. And it's this pair of semis in here. And what differentiates it from the other buildings, or many of the other buildings rather, in that group, is it doesn't have the dot on top. So that dot signifies a particularly important building, which we would consider to be a non-designated heritage asset. So that means that our site here, whilst it is in the conservation area and whilst it is locally important as part of a group, it's not an actual non-designated heritage asset in its own right. So the group value really comes from a view, I'll show you in a moment, of the rhythm in the street scene and the generalities of these particular dwellings alongside other dwellings in the same street scene. So I'll show you that in a moment. Other things to bear in mind are right opposite the site here, we have listed buildings, and there's another listed building just here, which anyone who's gone down this hill, as you turn that corner next to the crossing, it's very prominent, in a very prominent position there. So again, like the previous application, most of Portland is washed over by this important geological and geomorphological zone designation. And the western and southern boundaries of the application site are recorded by the Dorset Environmental Record Centre as a higher potential ecological network. It's also in an area of archaeological potential. It's Dorset Council-owned land, hence why it's before committee today. The two dwellings, number 11 was last occupied in around about, we think, 2008. Number 9 in 2018, so they've been abandoned since then, effectively. But there were previous consents in 2012 to demolish number 11 only and rebuild with a pair of new dwellings, creating a terrace of 3. So here are some photos. This first one, you can see how the gable end of number 11 is well and truly being held up by this scaffolding. You get slightly better, a different view here from Guernsey Street opposite, and you can see how overgrown it is. Lots of all the windows are gone. It's in a pretty sorry state. The roof is dipping as well. This top photo goes back to what I was saying before about the rhythm in the street scene and the commonality in materials and things like that, which is why our site, which is just up here on the right, is part of this important group of buildings. And this bottom photo shows the view from the Hambro car park. It's not exactly prominent from this view, but you can just about make it out around here. So this is a closer up view of the site, and hopefully you can make out that crack that goes all the way along the side and all the way to the roof. I'm told it's a couple of inches, but it has been getting bigger. And of additional concern, if you just pan left from that view, you get to this view here in the second photo, which shows a footpath. So if it does collapse, there is a potential health and safety issue here. Now, before I go on to the main planning merits, I think it's probably worth just giving a bit of extra background as how we got to this situation. And I've spoken to our properties team about it, and they've told me that there was that previous scheme in 2012 to redevelop the site, which unfortunately lapsed because it was unviable to build out. The council, or Weymouth and Portland Town Council, as it was, Borough Council, pardon me, back in October 2016, compulsory purchased number 11. And at that point, the council took on the ongoing costs for that scaffolding, which I should add has been there since about 2008. So if you go onto Google Street View, the earliest Street View they've got is 2009, and it's there then. The poor lady next door wanted to sell up. She couldn't, for an obvious reason. So when her house was on the market, the Borough Council then bought that off her. So the entire site came into our possession in around about 2018. After that, it was marketed twice for development, so in 2018 and in 2023, and there were no takers at all. The feedback that was received was it just couldn't be viably redeveloped, and it was very difficult to repurpose the buildings because of their age and ceiling heights as well. So we then thought, okay, well, we'll see what we can do as a council ourselves and put together a feasibility report, but that never even got any further than the report because it was simply not viable to redevelop. Since then, homeless people have been trying to enter it, and the police have been unable to get into the building to evict them because it's so unsafe. Our own building control colleagues are not prepared to go in the building either because of the safety issues. We've received a structural survey as part of this application that tells us it could collapse within 1 to 2 years. And the Portland Town Council is very much in favour of this application to just demolish it, which would then create an opportunity for Portland Land Trust to redevelop it without the hassle and cost of doing the demolition work first. So the result would be a vacant plot. So first that background and into the proposed plans, there's not a lot you can say really. It's plans showing a building removed. It would be a vacant plot. Principle of development. The reason this needs planning permission is because national legislation sets out that if you're demolishing a building of 115 cubic metres or more in volume in a conservation area, you need planning permission. However, there's nothing in national policy, the local plan or the neighbourhood plan about demolition applications. So our job today is to conclude as to whether or not what's proposed would actually result in any material harm. The first thing we need to consider then is the impact in heritage terms. So the Council's Conservation Officer is supportive of the application. She finds that the building is currently a detracting feature in the conservation area, and its removal would not be a particular issue. It's very unusual to grant planning permission in a conservation area for demolition works without sound plans in place for a replacement building. In this case, though, we are of the view that it's justified because of the health and safety implications, the fact that it's so detracting at the moment, but also Dorset Council's the landowner. Dorset Council has a degree of control as to when this gets redeveloped. So with those factors in mind, we feel that it is acceptable to have this gap in the conservation area because it's highly likely to be a short-term measure while the Land Trust puts together the plans for replacement building. In terms of archaeology, it's, well, this is a demolition application, so it's not proposing to go below ground level. If there is any archaeological interest, it would probably have been disturbed already, and we've got no objections from our archaeologists. Living conditions of neighbouring properties is obviously a key issue here, given the proximity. We've referred the application to environmental protection, rather, who are happy with the application, subject to a pre-commencement condition, which would require our agreement to details on noise, vibration, and dust mitigation. The applicant has also set out in their demolition statement the demolition sequence, so we can condition that to any permission as well. And a demolition sequence is effectively, it kind of states the obvious really, but it says about removing the roof first and then progressing downwards through the building. So whilst it does state the obvious, I think it's still a good idea to condition that. The agent estimates that work would take around about 6 weeks to complete, so it's likely to be a relatively short-term operation. And we can condition the demolition hours to between 8 in the morning and 6 o'clock in the evening, weekdays only. In terms of highways, obviously it's very close to one of the main routes out of Portland and to the pavement. So our highways officer is supportive of the application, subject to another pre-commencement condition, which would require the submission of a traffic management plan for our agreement first. Ecology and biodiversity again. Because of the deteriorated state of the particularly number 11, and it's quite overgrown at the moment, the applicant has submitted to us an ecological appraisal which shows that there are birds nesting in it, and there is a bit of bat roost potential, even though bats weren't actually found in there. The appraisal contains ecological mitigation measures, which our ecologist is happy with, and we can condition those to any grant of permission. Biodiversity net gain doesn't apply to this application because they're not actually building anything, and it falls within the de minimis threshold again. In terms of land contamination, our constraints mapping indicates 3 to 5% class 3 radon, which I think is common to a lot of Portland. Either way, we've not received any objections from environmental health in that respect. And then lastly, in terms of geology, again, in common with the other application I commented on, much of Portland is washed over by a geological designation, and so we're content that demolishing this building would not materially affect that designation. So the recommendation is to approve, subject to conditions. You'll see included in that is the pre-commencement noise, vibration, dust management, and the traffic management plan, the demolition sequence that I mentioned, and the hours for demolition restricted 8 till 6, Monday to Friday, and finally the compliance with the ecological assessment. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Steve. Two things before we move on. Councillor Pete Roper wants to speak as a ward councillor, so he's moved over to the public speaking area. Secondly, you may notice we're getting close to 3 hours. So I'm assuming that this one and the next one may take us over the 3-hour limit. Can I ask members if they're content to extend the meeting and carry on? We may avoid having a lunch break if so, but if it goes on further, we will stop for lunch. So all those in favour of extending the meeting past the 3 hours? Okay, I think that's carried. So in that case, thank you for your presentation. We will now have Councillor Pete Roper to speak for 3 minutes, please, Pete.
Thank you, Chair. Pete Roper, Ward Member for Portland. I'm delighted that this planning application is finally before this committee. These buildings are a well-known eyesore on Portland, situated on a steep hill, derelict and wrapped in scaffolding. They're on the main thoroughfare for traffic leaving the island. The negative impact of the street scene outside of these properties add to the impression of neglect in this area. When you pass these buildings, as I did this morning on the way over here, you can't help but notice the massive external cracks in the fabric of these two houses. Indeed, the structural survey report states that the stability of the building is temporarily satisfactory, but it must be addressed within 1 to 2 years to prevent premature, uncontrolled collapse. One of the reasons why these houses have been left to deteriorate is that a previous formal arrangement to demolish these properties was caught up in local government reorganisation between Dorset Council and Weymouth and Portland Borough Council some years ago. Some of you may remember the late Councillor Ray Novak, who was a driving force behind the redevelopment of this site. But here we are, finally a planning application to demolish these properties is being heard by committee. So if approved, this will be the first stage in a process that will see 5 or 6 flats being developed on this site in a joint venture between the Portland Community Land Trust and the Housing Association. This accommodation will lift those specifically who have a connection to Portland off the housing register. It is envisaged to be a mixed development of 1 and 2 bedroom flats. I would urge you to support this application. It is the first step in the planning process which will have a significant impact on the provision of social housing on the island. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Pete. That leads me to ask members if they have any technical questions for the officer, please. Councillor Kimber from Portland.
Councillor Paul Kimber, Portland. At the moment in that area, we've just about 100 metres further down, we've got another development going on for the Jehovah's Witnesses at Kingdom Hall. What's happened is the bus stop is out. I just wondered if when we start demolition, if we can time it when they finish. If we started to do it at the same time, it would take quite a lot of the road up in the way of getting all the materials out. That's just a request. Thank you. Or a technical question, can we?
Yeah, thank you for that, Paul. Steve?
I'm afraid, I'm afraid we can't. We need to give the standard commencement condition, which allows a developer 3 years in which they can implement the permission, but we can't say when at any point. I shouldn't think so. They've got, if committee's minded to approve this application, it's subject to pre-commencement conditions, and it normally takes a little while for those to be cleared anyway. So it could well be that they want to orchestrate that within amongst themselves as to when the road gets closed or whatever. But I'm afraid it's not something we've got the gift to change under this.
Thank you for that. You happy with that, Councillor Kimber? Okay. Other councillors? Councillor Weller, did you wish to speak?
It's not a technical question, so when you're in debate.
Any more technical questions? Councillor Northam.
Thank you. Looking at the site area, the land to the southwest surrounds the edge of this property. It looks vacant. It's got a footpath running through it, and I wonder who owns that land and whether that could form some land assembly. Thank you.
I'm afraid I can't answer that question. I'm not sure about the land ownership in that particular area.
Thank you, Councillor Northam. It's a fair answer. Okay, so you're happy with that. Any other technical questions? If not, we'll move to debate. No more technical questions. In that case, we'll move to debate, please. Any members wishing to speak? Councillor O'Leary, followed by Councillor Weller, followed by Councillor Kimber.
Yeah, Chairman, listening to the remarks from Councillor Roper, I'd like to propose that this is accepted.
Thank you very much, Councillor O'Leary. Do you seek a seconder, please? I think Councillor Monks was just before you. In that case, we have a proposal and a seconder. Does anybody else wish to continue to debate, or shall we go straight to the vote? Councillor Weller.
Can I just say that the sooner that this building is demolished, the better. It is a threat and has been a threat for a very long time, and it will be a very good tribute to former councillor Ray Novak, who worked tirelessly right up to the time of his death to get this done and to get it developed. So in his memory, I'd love us to go through it straight as quickly as possible. Never mind the bus stop or anything else, just get it down.
Thank you. Could you put the recommendation back on the screen, please, Steve? Nobody else wishing to speak? In which case we will move to the vote, which will be to accept the officer's recommendation and conditions as per you're just about to see on the screen. Right, it says grant subject to the following conditions. All those in favour, please raise your hands. And I believe this time it is actually unanimous, so thank you very much. The recommendation is approved. Thank you. So we'll move to the last item on the agenda today, which is Weymouth Harbour, which is P/FUL/2024/05538, Weymouth Harbour, Weymouth, DT48AJ. Councillor Weller, I believe you said you were going to leave the room on this one, or are you happy to stay? Okay, maybe I misunderstood then. I've put you down as Councillor Weller leaving. I don't know. I think you said did you not speak on the harbour before, on the Harbours Committee?
Not on this item, I didn't, not on F&G. I'm happy to leave the room if you'd like me to, but it wasn't on F&G. It was the other side. But I'm happy to go. Give me a shout when.
I'm not asking. I don't want you to leave. I'd love you to stay. But I think you made a statement. I think you made a statement at the beginning, which we made a note of. We did, didn't we? Yes. Okay, so we'll have this introduced, please, by Matthew Potin Hawkes. Over to you, Matthew. Thank you.
There we go. Thank you, Chair. This application is by Dorset Council. It's for Harbour Walls F&G at Weymouth Peninsula. It was reported to the January Planning Committee, where members resolved to grant planning permission subject to conditions and awaiting the outcome of the marine management, marine licensing application, which is currently with the MMO. And the reason it's being re-reported is because of the recommended changes to planning conditions which relate to biodiversity net gains. Essentially, it's a procedural technicality given the conditions were agreed at the last committee, and we're proposing to amend the conditions. So just to recap very briefly, this is the site. You've got Harbour Walls F and G. It also includes the adjacent open space and public car parks. This is an aerial view. The majority of the site is hard standing. There are some soft landscape and planters in there, and it includes part of the beach, which is relevant for biodiversity net gain. The application is for replacement of the walls in front of the existing walls here and here, and it would also create new areas of open space and refurbed open space as well. So at the January committee report, that noted that Habitat Management and Monitoring Plan, a HMMP, would be required at the pre-commencement stage for intertidal grey and green infrastructure. And that's because of the significant habitat creation, and that ongoing monitoring and management would be secured via a Section 106. Since the last committee, officers have explored the option of a Section 106 through a unilateral undertaking, but because the council is both applicant and local planning authority, we can't enter into agreement with ourselves. So, as explained in the committee report, that's proposed to be dealt with via these new conditions, conditions 14 and 15. They're essentially, condition 14 there, that secures a habitat management and monitoring plan before commencement of development. And that includes the details set out in the report, but that the management and mitigation measures would be secured for 30 years, and that HMMP would set out the monitoring methodology and frequency of the inspections. And that's relevant because it helps the local planning authority understand the costs involved in that monitoring. Condition 15 there is notice to the local planning authority on completion of those works which need to be monitored. So once the council has been notified under the terms of condition 15, we would be able to commence that monitoring process, and the funding for the monitoring would all be done through a transfer between council departments, so that could be monitored by the local planning authority. So the recommendation is as per the January committee, but with the two additional planning conditions, 14 and 15. And just to confirm again, the recommendation is for awaiting written confirmation from the Marine Management Organisation that the parallel marine licensing application secures appropriate mitigation for the marine ecology. And as it stands, we're still waiting for the MMO to confirm that. So that's the recommendation and the conclusion of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you much. Thank you very much, Matthew. You drew the short straw over that one, didn't you? Somebody strikes lucky. Members, any technical questions? I think it's just those extra two conditions that we've already been through this one at the last meeting. So no technical questions. Okay. Anybody wish to debate? Councillor Leary.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think it's quite simple, and therefore I would like to propose both recommendations for approval. If I can get a seconder.
Councillor Kimber.
Paul Kimber, Portland, happy to second.
Okay, so to recap, everyone's put your hands up for the vote in a minute. The recommendations were to accept those two conditions, Matthew, were they, or to delegate authority to?
It was to delegate authority, as out in the report, firstly waiting for the MMO, and then as per all of the previous conditions, plus the two new ones that I've just set out today.
Okay, so members happy with that? In that case, I'll ask if we can go to the vote. All those in favour of accepting the recommendation? And that is unanimous again. Thank you very much for that. We now move to item 10, urgent items. There are no urgent items. Item 11, exempt business, and there isn't any exempt business. So thank you very much. The meeting is finished spot on 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So we didn't need to vote for the extension, but thank you very much, members, and the meeting's now closed.